Hello and welcome to the Front End Horse live stream. I am really happy to be back in this room. That's a different pink than I remember. I don't remember. That's very pink. I don't know. I've been away for so long. I look tan, but I think it's only because I turned down this setting. When I do this, I'm back to myself, and my teeth look amazing in this setting. But yeah, hey everybody, I'm back in the room. I'm back in the room. Fun fact. This isn't actually painted pink and blue. That's just that's a light illusion. So yeah, fun fact for all the people who get here first. Everyone else comes in and they're like, oh, he painted his room. That you get the inside scoop. You get the behind the scenes. I'll show you later. Follow me on I don't know something, and I'll show you that they're lights. All right. Anyway, I'm just so happy to be here. I'm really thrilled. Couple things up front before I bring on our mystery guest. Does it say it anywhere? I hope not. I hope it doesn't say it anywhere. Don't look down there. It's a mystery guest. I'm stealing Steph's whole concept. It's Dev Roulette over here on the Front End Horse channel. And wow, we have some phenomenal people in the chat already. Ghostly Tuna, Ben, Aaron, Banana Stand, Will. I saw Steph in here. Don't tell her about my theft. Just some really great people. Jacob's here. Fantastic. Kevin is here. Oh, man, that's fantastic. Yeah, just some really. Oh, and Lars, right? El Suxo. I'm gonna try to learn your actual name because saying El Suxo just feels mean to me, and I'm trying to be nice. So, Lars, Anthony. Oh my goodness, everyone's here. I'm so hyped. This everything on Tuesday now is actually going to be. Let me just turn that down a little bit. Is going to be what we call Front End Stampede. And so Front End Stampede is a new show. It's not going to be as like crazy polished and filled out as Component Carousel is, but the whole concept is basically bringing on people that don't exist just within the Component Carousel niche, right? So like I want to learn about design systems. I want to learn about Chakra UI. I want to learn about Astro. I want to learn about all kinds of different things that don't just fit into that small, narrow category. And plus, we got time to kill, baby. We got lots of time to kill. So let's expand a little bit. So Tuesdays are going to be Front End Stampede. Wednesdays are going to be Component Carousel. Thursdays, just hold on to your seats. Thursdays are going to be Creative Rodeo. And yes, they all have stupid names. And then Friday, we're riding solo, baby. It's just going to be me working on something cool. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's going to be... Mike's here too in the chat. Amazing. But yeah, so we've got a full thing. Mondays, I'm sleeping in Mondays. But we got Front End Stampede, Creative Carousel... Component Carousel, Creative Rodeo, and then Riding Solo. It's going to be a full week of fun stuff here on the channel. Lots of creativity, lots of fun development. That's the new lineup. I'm going to be posting more about that later, but I think I've talked long enough. Everyone is here, not for me. Thomas is here in the chat too. Hey, good to see you. So yeah, let's move on from me, from just me at least, and let's bring in our guest for today. Hey, Mike, great to see you. How you doing?
I'm
Mike?
doing great.
Okay, cool. Oh my goodness.
Sorry. I was on mute so that I could.
I was terrified, Mike. I just got the room back,
stuff.
and you're making me think that it's just. I thought it was cursed for a second. I'm adjusting some volume levels. Give me a howdy or a wow. It's great to be here on Front End Stampede. Either one.
It is so great to be here on Front End Stampede. How you doing today, Alex?
You're coming through loud and clear, and your check is in the mail. So I really appreciate it. Ed is here. Wow, we have some fantastic people. So I'm gonna try it. I practiced once before the stream. Mike Aparicio. Oh, I botched it.
Nailed it.
No,
Nailed
really?
it.
No. Aparicio. Help me out, man. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I really wanted to get that right.
Oh, are you serious? I thought we were doing a bit.
Yes, we're doing a bit. Now it's your turn to do the bit where you say the name right.
So I had told Alex previously, if you are Latino, it's Aparicio. And if you're from Chicago, it's Aparicio. So
Aparicio.
Take your pick.
Blew it. Aparicio. I should have gotten one. I made up a third. I went option C.
I'm used to people butchering it, so
yeah. But I see here on Front End Horse, we try to be like a step above. We try to be like next level kind of thing. So I really try to make sure that I'm coming in and I'm giving you the respect you deserve, because I don't know. I feel like you deserve respect. Call me crazy. But yeah, so Mike, what do you do? What is your 9 to 5, your bread and butter, your passion, and why are you here?
So I am currently the senior design systems engineer for a startup here in Chicago called Provi. It is a kind of a B2B app that connects alcohol retailers and distributors. Yeah, I built our design system, which is called Fizz. And prior to that, I spent close to 9 years at Groupon in a similar role. And before that, I was essentially a web guy who just did, you know, uh, I was solely responsible for all things web at various places.
So web guy is a
So
good title. Web guy kind of covered
yeah,
it. That's what you're saying. So yeah,
yeah. I mean, my technical title was webmaster, but
web. That's a term you don't hear anymore. That's just
you don't hear it a
you
lot.
had
No.
webmaster a lot back. I don't know, like 2000s, maybe yeah, like late 90s, 2000s, and then since the 2010s, 2020s, it has not popped up a lot. But that's awesome. Fizz like gin fizz, Lars says. I think fizz like any kind of carbonation is my guess, or is it a specific thing like gin fizz? I don't drink much,
You
so
know,
I'm not cool. I
it's
don't know the
open to
stuff.
interpretation.
Oh, okay. Are design systems open to interpretation in general, or are they kind of the opposite of that?
Sorry, say that again.
Are designs? I mean, like it's kind of the opposite of what I imagine a design system is. And part of the big reason you're here is to teach me really what a
Yeah.
design system is. I have a very scattershot understanding of it, where my
Yep.
understanding of design system, like oh, like I really yeah. I'll see, IBM's design system, or is it something else? That's one thing I think we can start with is what's the
Yeah.
difference between like a design system and there's like two other terms that I'm completely blanking on right now.
Like a pattern library
Yeah,
and maybe like a UI kit or something like that.
something like that.
So uh so briefly, I'll just tell you kind of how I went from being a webmaster to like a design systems person, right?
Okay.
When I went to Groupon, um, I was initially hired to work on this redesign, and it wasn't going well. And an opportunity came up to work on our internal tools teams, where we had basically two designers and about a half dozen engineering teams building tools for salespeople and things like that. And so the challenge was like, how do we take the work of these two designers and scale it across these different teams so that it looks consistent? And so I went from being this web guy to kind of uh, being like the CSS guy, right? So rather than like having to write all this CSS for all these different projects, we were like, should we look at like Twitter Bootstrap and then customize that to match these designs? And then eventually we decided let's just make our own CSS framework. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And then as time progressed, like I moved to different parts of the company and built different CSS frameworks. But the problem with CSS frameworks is that if you are building a iOS app or an Android app, for example, it doesn't really do you a whole lot of good, right?
Right.
So maybe 3, 4 years ago, design systems really started to kind of become popular, and we started looking at like design tokens as like a means to translate design decisions across these different platforms. And so about a year ago, I started at Provi. I'm actually working for uh, the same manager who I worked under on that first internal tools team. He
Nice.
recognized the kind of the benefit of having a design system and decided that Provi was ready to have a design system, and so that's kind of where we're at.
That's awesome. And in the chat, yes, Thomas and Ben kind of teamed up to help me out. Style guide and component library. Yeah, so like design system and style guide. I've used them. Admitting to my crime, I've used them interchangeably throughout my life. Where I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
we should, because I've also always seen the benefit. Like I not knowing what I was doing, preached about it at a couple companies ago, where it's like, we're making components that look wildly different from one another. This page has a heading that's like 16 pixels, and this one has one that's 20, and it's just things are all over the place. We need and I just chose one of the words, style guide or design system, right? Like we should have this.
Yep.
So like I understood like and well, my understanding of the benefits are that you are able to kind of put down the rules for how things work. So like when there is in H1 alone on a page, it's this big. When we have an active button, it's this color. When it's disabled, it's this color, right? Like all those kinds of things go into it, along with things like spacing and which font we're using. But then when it came time to like implement it, it's like, oh, someone
Right.
has to make these decisions, and oh, there's just no time, right? Like we kind of
Yeah.
constantly got this like, oh, there's no time feedback, but it felt like we were spending so much time making new decisions that could have been made when we
Right.
created the design system. So yeah, I'm
So
excited to
it
get into
can be
this.
that.
Yeah,
So at Groupon, depending on who you asked, the design system meant something completely different, right? So if you asked
interesting.
a designer, what's the design system? They pointed to the Figma UI kit and said, this is the design system.
Got
You
it.
point to, you ask an engineer, what's the design system? They would say it's our component library,
Right.
completely separate thing, right? You ask a product person, what's the, design system? They say, oh, it's that website that has, essentially all of the, the documentation, right? And
Is
if
that
you
kind of like
ask,
the IBM or like the Airbnb, like
yeah,
different big
uh-huh.
companies? What's IBM's called? If I could bring it up.
Oh, you're quizzing me now. I have it here in my folder here. IBM
Carbon. I win. Sorry.
Carbon. Yes, Carbon. Very
I
good.
am the design
And
system
Ben in the
master
chat is
now.
on it. Yeah.
Yes,
So
they don't
yeah,
need to quiz.
you have like material design, Salesforce, things like that. The thing with that is like all of these, there's a lot of design systems that are public, which I really love because I've
Yeah.
drawn inspiration from a lot of these. But like, you're not, if you're starting a new project, you're not going to use Carbon, right? Like the Carbon was built to solve IBM's problems,
Right.
not, Alex's problems. And so like going from Groupon to Provi, I couldn't just take Groupon's design system and like slap a coat of paint on it and
Just
call it a day,
change the
right?
green to a blue or something, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's funny because that's exactly what I had to do.
See?
But typically like every project is a new thing, right? So even on my side projects, it's just me working on it, but I'm essentially creating a design system for each individual project from scratch. So it just really helps me kind of maintain consistency, and I'm not just like kind of eyeballing stuff and moving things,
Right.
pixel to pixel. I'm sticking to like distinct values, and it just makes everything look more cohesive. Because I am not a I didn't go to school for design or engineering. I actually went to school for sports journalism. So
That's
uh
awesome.
so I kind of have this, role where I'm like right squarely in between design and engineering. And my thing has always been like, how do I get these two, you know, organizations like in sync, right? Um, and so, here's why we need design systems, right? In a lot of organizations, design team is delivering a picture of a website to an engineering team and saying, here, make this a website.
Right.
And then the engineering team, is filled with a lot of people with varying skills and interests, right? Maybe they're full stack, maybe they're back end, maybe they're front end, but they all have kind of varying degrees of experience with
Okay.
CSS, right? And we're essentially, when we're talking about design decisions, we're talking primarily about CSS,
Right. Makes
and
sense.
to a lesser degree HTML, right? Um, but if you give the same picture of a website to 10 different engineers, you're going to get 10 different websites, right?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
the analogy I like to use is like it's like a painter doing this beautiful painting and handing it to a sculptor and saying, make me a statue of this, right? And the
Got it.
sculptor's looking at this painting and like, how big is this supposed to be? What does the back look like? Like, what's the stuff in the background? I can't paint all
And
this,
they
or I can't
shrug and they just go
sculpt,
for it.
I
Yeah.
can't sculpt this tree, right? And then you get this thing back, and the designer's like, well, what the hell is that? That's not what I painted, you know?
Right.
And so there's like this disconnect, right? And so design systems are a way that kind of like the way I describe it, it's like a shared language between design, engineering, and product that kind of describes how we make products within our organization.
Cool.
Um, but also it's like an agreement, right? Like we're saying, like these are the values we're using, and this is what we're calling them.
Right.
And so regardless of like how you might implement that, whether it's in Figma or whether it's on the web or iOS or Android, like we're all able to like have these conversations, and we're clear like that, red 600 is whatever in our respective implementations, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of like why we need them, right?
Yeah.
And we can spend some time talking about like how do we get there?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like I am excited for today because it's not just going to be kind of a chat around our design system's cool, right? Like whatever. Like you're actually going to make one with us based around this site. It's like indie kind of site that you found. What it's um, front end
Something
horse.
about
You yeah,
mules
it's
or something.
something weird. But anyway, yeah. So do you want to kind of? I think that's a pretty good intro to design systems, just in the sense of getting us kind of up and running with some shared terminology and allowing us to kind of now go into it where um, we don't need to say right now all the little parts of it, because we're going to go and we're going to create one from an existing page. You kind of said as we were planning this that we could go in two different ways. We could create one to start and then build a site from it, or create one from a site and kind of like work backwards. And that's what we're going to be doing today,
Yeah.
right?
I think, I mean, that's the situation that a lot of people are in. They're taking an existing product and like, okay, how do we make a system out of this so that we can continue to build on it? If you're very rarely like starting a new thing, unless it's like a side project or something, you're very rarely going to start a new thing with a design system.
and
A
and
lot of
and
time
when
you're
I do, the project doesn't get finished. Honestly, like I'm like I
right. Yeah.
because I know it's good practice. I know, and I'll be
Yeah.
like, all right, got to figure out my headers and my buttons and everything first. And I go and I search the Figma community and I find, a really good design system kit. And I'm like, oh, I just got to tweak this a bit. And eventually I'm just like, I'm just start a new Figma file. I'm just going to throw some rectangles down and go for it. Yeah, that's what happened with this. That's the
Yeah.
story right there. Like I went through, I'm like, oh,
So
I'm going to do a design system because this was like a rebrand,
yeah.
and it just kind of fell apart.
So I mean, for me, like as a CSS person, right? Like I've used CSS to kind of drive the systems, but like I mentioned earlier, there's like you could have your Figma UI kit, you could have a component library, uh, and in my role at Provi, like I'm squarely responsible for like just the CSS framework, the documentation, and then helping design and engineering make implementations of the system on their ends that work for them.
Got it.
And for the most part, I try and make these systems so that they're like stack agnostic, right? So that like it's not tied to any one technology, because 2 years from now, Figma's going to be falling out of favor, and there's going to be some new hotness. And then on the engineering side, it's always this constant cycle of like new things, right? Just at Groupon, we went through like 5 different stacks in the 8 years I was there. So
Wow.
the nice thing about CSS is that nothing has replaced CSS. Uh,
There's
Things have come
frameworks
along
and things
to
like that, but not
yeah, but it's not like,
CSS.
the browser is still rendering CSS, right? It's
Right.
not it's not asking you for, I'm not going to mention any names, but some specific framework or something like that, right? It's
Yeah.
all being compiled into CSS, right? And so CSS is adding features, but nothing's like coming along to replace CSS, right?
Right. Makes sense. We got a couple things to chat. First off, Thomas, I think at another point wants to hear about your journey from sports journalism to where you are now. I would also like to hear that, but I also don't want to get in the way of this design system stuff. But back in the Discord, we're going to hold you to it. Shauna,
Yeah, we
thank
would
you
chat
for
about that in
following.
Discord.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Um, Ben says, and I wish I could click the thing and have it come up, Ben. So just imagine I'm clicking it, and your beautiful message is showing. I'm a big fan of Dan Mall's philosophy, which is that when you're building a site, you inherently have a design system because you have to make design decisions. It's more a question of whether that design system is intentional or emergent. I like those two
Yeah,
words as kind of a
I'm a
dichotomy.
big Dan. I'm a big Dan Mall fan. And we definitely align, I think, a lot on our philosophies. And I've certainly learned a lot from Dan in his stuff.
Nice.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Jacob says he asks, do you get involved in the component portion of the design, especially since you mentioned you focus on the CSS?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I work really closely with our both our designers and our engineers. So with the designers, I kind of stay in front of new features to make sure that everything that is in those features, is in the UI kit for the designers to reuse, but also that it's in the CSS framework so that when the engineers start building it, um, then we make sure that like essentially like if I'm doing my job well, no one else besides me should have to write CSS, right?
Oh,
Like
cool.
our CSS framework has everything that engineers need to build the thing, so they can focus more on like how it works than what it looks like, right? Because a lot of
Interesting.
every engineer, when you hear CSS, whether you're good at it or not, you think of that GIF of Peter Griffin like struggling with the blinds, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debate over, whether CSS is a programming language or whatever. But
I don't care.
I saw a tweet once that was basically like, if you the more people you have working on CSS, like the worse it is, right? So like if you can just have one person working on it. But like the idea too is that like if your design system gets to a certain level of maturity, you can essentially, instead of delivering pictures of websites, you can have a front-end person like myself work with designers to very quickly create a high fidelity HTML and CSS prototype that you can then deliver that to engineers, gets them a huge head start, and they can just kind of like essentially wire it up, right, and make
That's
everything
cool.
work. Um, and the other benefit of that too is you can put that in front of stakeholders. They can pull it up on their phone, on their tablet, on their laptop,
Right.
whatever, and they can see what it's going to look like instead of like just seeing a picture of a website.
Right. Or
They
like
can
frames in
interact with it.
Figma that you have to click a
Yeah,
certain spot or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and we can put that in front of users and do user testing, and that can help us kind of like validate our decisions like much earlier in the process. And also once we get that to engineering, it speeds up that whole thing as well.
Got it. Cool. That's yeah. I didn't realize that you're yeah just the part of your job where it's mainly CSS and you get to kind of like own that. That's such a cool role. I really didn't know that that was a thing that you could just do all the time.
Yeah.
Like that
I
was
mean,
always my favorite part.
it's really like I look at it as a service job, right? So designers and engineers are my customers, not like Provi's end
End
customers,
user,
right?
yeah.
That's right. So I'm there to kind of like, support the design team in making sure that like that their work is translatable accurately into code, and
Got
I'm
it.
there to help the engineers like kind of facilitate that with the engineers, right?
Are you only
Help them.
saying that so that if someone in the chat gets like a bad order, they can't come and complain to you? You can say, you're not my customer. Designers are my customer.
Well, yeah, I often
Smart.
say
That's
like
smart.
I don't care what the product is. Not to say I don't think we have a great product, but like
It could be anything,
I'm not it could be anything, right?
right?
Like I hate the Lego analogy, but like, I'm essentially just like creating the blocks, right? And the designers and the engineers are deciding whether they're making Lego Harry Potter or Lego Avengers or whatever, right? It's
Right.
like I'm just making sure that there's the same amount of little, divots on each block, and making sure that the colors are all accurate and stuff like that. And if a designer has some crazy new thing that needs like a special hinge that we don't have in the system, I can add the hinge, but like I don't care what you do with it, right? Like
Right. No,
so
that's a cool analogy, and yeah, just the fact that like I see people in the chat also finding this to be pretty fascinating because yeah, I didn't know that you could just handle CSS all day. I think that's an awesome gig. I'm pretty excited. Jacob says, don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much, but I'm curious how you approach testing. Some pieces of it are going to be dependent on the CSS, but also it matters how the components are put together. Now, I'm going to give you the option. Do we want to save this one for like after? Like, are we going to touch on this as we go, or should
No,
we
yeah,
hit that
I
right
think
now?
that's a good question.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I usually pass the buck on testing. I mean, I test as far as like CSS is concerned, but as far as like writing tests for like components and stuff like that, um, that's kind of outside the scope of my expertise, right? Is
Okay,
building components. And so I will help them, use the correct classes from the framework and the correct markup to create the thing. But that's kind of on them to test everything and make sure the components work and stuff. Um,
cool.
and same with the design team, right? Like I can help them build the UI kit, but that's not kind of really where my time is best spent. But certainly getting them up and running. But like, I love our team at Provi. Like, everybody just kind of bought into the system, like from the get-go. A lot of times, design systems work. A lot of it is selling it and convincing people that it's worthwhile and getting
Buy-in from stakeholders.
resources. Right. Yeah. So having had that previous relationship with my boss and him knowing the benefit of it, and he's the CTO, like if you can get that buy-in from the top, just everybody's just like,
That's so much
immediately sees
easier
the
from day
benefit of it.
one.
Yeah, because
That's great.
at like at a peer level, everyone sees the value in it because I'm saving the designers time because they're not going back and forth with engineers about this doesn't look like the picture.
Right.
I'm saving engineers time because they're not spending, 25-30% of their time writing CSS. Like, you have no idea how many engineers, like, if they don't have to write CSS, they're like, oh, this is fucking great, right?
Yeah, I mean, people
Like,
people
they
have
love
their
it.
specialties, their preferences, absolutely, and
Yeah,
forcing
yeah,
forcing someone to be a full stack engineer when they just want to be damn good
right.
at one thing, it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of a
mean, no,
crime. Yeah,
I could talk for 2 hours about that whole
yeah,
term.
absolutely.
You can go to fullstackoverflow.dev. That's my little ode to that. But I
Drop
mean,
that in.
I don't have a problem with people who say that they're full stack engineers, but like everyone is on a kind of this spectrum of like their skills and interests, right? And they might be able to do all of that stuff. Like in a former life, I did a lot of PHP in my SQL. Um, but that wasn't really where my interests lie, right? Like I
Right.
just wanted to, make stuff work, right? But like if you look at anyone on Twitter, like that's in the industry, they might have a lot of those skills, but they kind of their interest lies in typography, or accessibility or 11D, right? And so they might be able to do all this other stuff, but they're passionate about like kind of a narrower subset of those things.
Yeah, no, that's um, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I do want to shout out Ben. Thank you so much. Sorry I had to wait on that. Like, thank you. But I didn't want to cut our fantastic guest off. So
Oh,
generous, Ben.
Kevin's in the house.
I think that's your second sub just today. Thank you so much.
Kevin, big
Yeah,
big fan of Kevin Powell.
Kevin Powell. Yeah, yeah. No, it's and he just got gifted a sub. So Kevin, it's great to have you.
Sweet.
We've got to get you on here sometime. And Max here, Thomas. Yeah. He says it's interesting because as systems goes, um, as systems go, it cannot exist without an observer. So where a system is seen, it exists. This is why I believe that the components, the visual building blocks, are just artifacts of this observational process, almost documenting it, hinting to it. It's kind of like
That's deep.
philosophical. Yeah, man. Yeah.
Here's what I'll say though, is that like you can start a system with code, that's fine. However, if you're getting designs, you're still getting pictures of websites designed to you. If those designers are not on the same page as your component library, you're going to keep getting all these one-offs that
Mm.
don't really fit in with your system. And you can address that in two different ways. You can either add all of those things to the system, and then you just end up with your system just keeps getting
It's a
bigger and
kitchen
bigger.
sink.
Right. Or you can kind of have this conversation where like, okay, well, that's doesn't align with the system, but we can use this value or something like that, right? And we'll probably get into that as we explore this project that we're working on.
Sounds good. And Mac redeemed stretch. I don't know if I can get up and stretch when a guest is on. Normally, I would do a little bit of maybe touch my toes or something. But
Oh, I can redeem my 14,000 horse bucks now? Is that what's
yeah,
going on?
you've been bringing
Oh.
it up
Oh,
almost daily. So
wow.
now there's all
Look at all
kinds of
this.
things. I'm afraid of you, Mike, because I think you have enough points to hydrate me into a flash flood. So
Guide the
I'm a
raid.
little afraid, to be honest.
I need the 10K tier.
Yeah, Swag Killer redeemed Hydrate. All right, I'm going to do it. But Jacob says, with the recent buildup of frameworks, it seems like design systems are becoming more tied to the framework slash component. So it's interesting hearing your take on it.
Yeah, I mean it's really like the design system can be whatever you want it to be, right? So if you're an engineer, certainly your focus is going to be on the component end, and if you're a designer, your focus is going to be on like how do I make everyone's job is going to be like how do I make my life easier, whether you're a designer, engineer, or product person. And so that'll kind of inform what your system is, right? Maybe your system is just a UI kit, right? Which is fine, but at least if why I say start with design is because if your designers are delivering consistent pictures of websites, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, not to say it doesn't matter, but you're going to end up with more consistent products delivered than if you do it the other way around, right?
Right.
Because if the designers aren't aligned with the component library, they're just going to keep, creating new stuff.
Just to
And
being artistic and just
yeah.
create like, hey, I have a new idea for the button. Like, please don't have a new idea. We don't need 10 buttons.
And that's
Um,
another challenge, right? With design systems is like how do we like adhere to the system while also not constraining our designers to be creative, right? Because that's what designers do, right? They want to make new stuff and innovate on stuff. But like there's areas where we can innovate on the experience without like, reinventing what a button is or,
right.
uh,
Sadly, I'm pretty sure I have two buttons on my site, so
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, no, I know. But do we want to get into that now? Because
Yeah.
next up on our steps is visual style audit of site, and so the site that
Yeah.
you chose is this
Hmm.
little thing, front end
Yep.
horse, my site, and honestly, like, I'm I'm equal parts horrified to like dig under the hood in public, but at the same time, super super grateful to you for putting in the time. Because like, I mean, honestly, if I were to hire you or someone like you for like a freelance audit of my site, how much would that be? Probably.
Well, my invoice is in the mail, so you should be getting that soon. But yeah, I don't really do freelance stuff. I haven't really put a number on it, but like the way I look at it, like the value in design systems is like for every engineer you hire that doesn't have to write CSS, like that's worth money, right?
Right.
So as the company scales, it just gets more and more valuable. It becomes this awesome like onboarding tool where like you get people on board with how we create things at our company, like from the get-go, instead of them just kind of like coming in with their own, way of doing things and applying that and then getting this kind of mishmash. Um,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
like, I remember working on a product, and even small things that, like, are we doing grid or flexbox would vary wildly from engineer to engineer, right? Like, just
yeah,
there's a lot of different ways to create a layout off of a picture. I mean, like, you've already said this,
absolutely.
but
Yeah,
I'm just kind of like I'm remembering, oh yeah, wow, if we had one person doing the CSS, that would have
yeah,
sped us up dramatically, and it would have kept it very consistent, where it wouldn't be like one person going into the CSS and being like, why are we doing it this way, right? Like, it's just
right.
the way it's done, and you just put the classes on. I don't know. It sounds like a great concept to me. So where do we start with a visual style audit?
Yeah, so anytime I go into a project where I want to kind of systematize things,
Hmm.
the first thing I do is go to a site called cssstats.com.
Cool.
And then, yeah, I just plug in the URL there.
All right, we'll drop this in.
And I
And
love this site. It gives you just kind of a nice overview of like everything that's going on. The first thing I'm going to point out is that in the upper right there's a bunch of file sizes of various frameworks,
Ah, here.
and a lot of people often uh, it's kind of confusing because people think that like your CSS includes all of these things, maybe. But this is just like for comparison of like the size of your CSS compared to like popular frameworks.
That's pretty
Um,
bulky. I didn't realize my CSS was this hefty.
it's not the worst. When I got to Provi, our CSS was like 850K or something like that.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I later found out, literally like months later, I found out that they were pulling in uh I think Bulma or something like that. And that was like, I don't know, 400K. And then the further I dug into it, like we weren't even using it. They were just doing like an include of that entire
Yeah.
library. So I was able to cut it down a little. But Fizz is like covers the styles for all of our apps, and it's about 75K right now.
And
Um,
mine's a little dinky blog, and it has more than that. So like, there's something
as a
that needs
lot.
to be addressed here. So
We can yeah. So if you scroll down,
as I
this will
said,
tell
grateful and
you.
terrified.
Yeah, like I wouldn't worry about this so much. What we're really concerned with when we're looking at starting a design system are like like kind of the cornerstones of visual styles are color, typography, and spacing, right? Those are kind of like the three biggies, right? Like if
Okay.
you think of CSS, like 80, 90% of stuff is like deciding what color a thing is, what the type looks like, and what the margins and padding is, right? And so if we can even take one of those things and like create a system around it, like just lock down the colors, right? Just
Right.
lock down the type. That's like a huge step in the right direction. So looking at colors, we have like a lot of it's kind of hard because this site kind of doesn't work great when you use custom properties. And so it doesn't like
Right.
render
It's
those colors.
confused by these, right?
Yeah.
Like it's confused. It
Yeah.
thinks that I'm using a whole bunch of different colors. I want to make this bigger for
I
the
was
audience.
I was also confused why you had like a value for the text opacity
So
on
that's
those.
A
Maybe there's
Tailwind
something else in
thing.
that. Is it?
Tailwind
Okay.
does like when you put in like gray 500 or something.
Right,
Tailwind
right.
actually puts in RGBA with a CSS property at the end. It just allows for like a quick way to fade that in or out on the actual color. And so that's what that is. These
Interesting.
are my brand colors here. That's is that my what is that might be an
Mhm.
old one actually. I don't recognize that purple either.
So this is a great way to like surface those things, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
you're like,
weird.
oh, okay. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of go back and forth between this and the live site, and I'll just start inspecting like where are these colors actually in use, right?
Right.
And then I'll go into like VS Code and I'll just start like basically making like a SAS a SAS file that just has like, and you don't have to use SAS. You could use custom properties or whatever to make your design tokens. But I just start listing all the colors, right? And then I try and like find like so I kind of did a lot of the legwork in advance of this because I didn't think we were gonna be able to knock this out in 2 hours. But we can talk about like kind of how I arrived at that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so going through your colors, there were values that were, coming from Tailwind, right? That were RGBA.
Mm-hmm.
There were hex values.
Yeah.
And so what I like to do is I go to actually if you want to pull up that doc thing that I made.
The
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. So let's go to color.
Cool.
Um
Should we drop this in the chat, or is that
yeah, go ahead and
gonna
drop that
reveal
in the chat. No, yeah.
spoilers? And
Whatever.
but yeah,
Let's
no,
let's
it's fine.
spoil it.
Yeah.
Let's spoil it.
Banana Stand says that their site is 269 KB. Oops, got work to do. And yeah, HSL is super cool. I generally
Yeah.
lean on HSL when it comes time for like doing any kind of like code pen sort of thing where like changing the color is gonna be needed because HSL makes
Yeah.
that so easy.
For me though, it's like particularly like so one thing I like to do with color, design systems are a great way to kind of Trojan horse accessibility and performance. A lot of
Okay.
a lot of times uh you know, it's a
Huh.
struggle to prioritize those things because we're constantly kind of like trying to ship new features, right? Like we have this roadmap and we have all these features that we're trying to do. And so adding, uh, adding a week's work to like add accessibility, like it's hard to convince people that that's worthwhile, even though as kind of practitioners of the web, we all know how important that is, but we're not the people writing the checks, right?
Right.
And so a lot of
Unfortunately, not
times we
not
have to.
yet. We're gonna be, Mike. We're
That's right.
we're
That's
gonna
right.
come up with that app that I told you about. It's gonna be huge.
Nice.
Yeah.
So like designing a system, like it's very easy to like adjust the color palette so that all the color combinations are accessible, right? And so
Right.
that's kind of what I did here. So you can just kind of like open some of these in new windows, like the color converter,
Ooh.
that first link. So this is a cool little tool. Like it was very handy for your site that had a lot of different values. So I could
Right.
just I could drop an RGBA in there. I could drop a
Oh.
hex value in there, and it would convert it to HSL for me. And then so I put all the
That's
values in
cool.
HSL,
Hmm.
and then I can kind of like I can tweak them in there and make them accessible while still kind of retaining the kind of the intent of that color, right?
That's really nice.
Yeah, so that's a cool tool. If you go to the palette generator, is that it?
HSL. That
HSL palette generator. Yeah. So this is a code pen that I forked.
nice.
I'm slipping on the original creator, but all I did was like add an additional color value in there, so that because the way that I do colors is like similar to, and you see this in a lot of systems now, where the color ends with like a three-digit number, right? Like 100, 200, 300.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
Like
the
font
reason
weights.
the yeah, exactly. So just like font weights, like it's a lot easier to discern what's like bigger, 600 or 800, right? Than it is to figure out like particularly if you have color names like you know, gray and like especially with grays, like you get like light gray, medium gray, extra gray, and you just keep running out of like names to call it,
Cobalt.
and you're like, well, which
Silver.
one is darker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two benefits to having these numbers, right? One is it helps you figure out which is lighter or darker.
Hmm.
Two is once you've created a palette using these numbers, you can create rules around uh, color combinations. So in our case, the color palette that I made for front end horse, anything that's 600 or higher is accessible on backgrounds that are 200 or lower, right? Or white. And
Oh.
so then like you don't have to worry about, well, we're baking in these color combinations into our system so that like, we might have a yellow color in our palette, but we don't want like with something like Tailwind, you could just use any color for anything, right?
Right.
And what we want to do is make sure that colors are being used in specific contexts so that,
Wow.
our brand color is only being used for backgrounds and text, but not in certain situations. So what I did was I went through your color palette, I narrowed down the colors. I went in here and kind of tweaked, so like let's say your brand, let's take a look at your brand color, right? So if you go to go to CSS, the CSS stats
Oh. Here.
window. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of windows open,
No
and just
worries.
like grab that color, grab that
This one.
orange color.
Is that
Sure.
is that the right
I
one?
think I think that's it.
Yeah.
And then
Don't I have a? Hold on. Do I have a? Oh no, I'm doing something.
or you could you could even just inspect like that
There we go.
color
That
there.
yeah.
There you go.
So
So
F8
snag that hex,
cool.
drop
Let
that
me
in
see
the
if
color
that's
converter.
that. Oh, it's not here. Interesting. That's
It's
interesting.
probably one of the RGBA values that you just
Got it.
can't see.
This is this one.
Or yeah,
Cool.
there you go. So grab that, drop it in the color converter to get the HSL value.
Where do I put it?
Yeah, the other guy, the color converter.
Oh, sorry. I'm
There you go. I know. Yeah, there's a
cool.
lot of windows. So
No
now we have
worries.
the HSL. So then in the palette generator, we can kind of create that value, right? So we get the right hue. We and then the
So come here.
yeah, go in there.
Cool.
Yep. And then just drag that little hue thing on the bottom. You see the controls on the bottom. Just match that up with your hue.
Okay. So I
And
got
yeah,
39264. So 3. Be very precise. I'm not going to get 3. So 2 is close enough
You
for
can
this.
use the arrow keys to like fine tune it.
Yes. Nice. All
Yeah.
right.
And then you
And
can
then
do the
thing 2.
saturation. Yeah.
Cool.
And then so this is already like kind of, and then like you can tweak the higher and lower ends of the lightness
Oh.
to get like the exact number. But then like that this kind of helps me figure out like I'm shooting to get like shade 6 is like gonna
The
be
color.
in most cases, shade 6 is gonna be accessible on white backgrounds. Um, and
Okay.
we might need to tweak it
Oh, it's just
for,
okay. Got it.
other things. Yeah. So looking at like your colors, like if we go back to the doc that I made, there's a contrast checker in
Is
the
it
color
up or
section near the
down?
top. Yeah.
Contrast checker this.
Uh, contrast checker. Yep. So we can like plug in the hex value
Right.
and see like what's the contrast ratio on white. And so your brand color was like exactly 3.0 on white. Um, and so I tweaked it a little bit because it's not accessible. So
Oh.
3 to 1 means like it's accessible but only on large type, which in
Okay.
this particular instance for the header, it's fine. Um,
But like this isn't
but
accessible, is what you're saying.
that's not accessible. Yeah. So I made a separate I basically made I tweaked the brand color so that it
Yeah.
passed on that kind of like beige background.
Right.
Um, and so it looks more or less the same. And then I made a darker color for smaller text that was accessible 4.5 to 1 for smaller text. So yeah, that's the red
Got it.
600. So so like going back to like the rules, right? Red 600 will pass on white or it
Gray
passes on the
200.
yellow 200 or yellow 100, I should
Right.
say.
Let me make this bigger.
And so we can kind of like make these general rules about how you know how these colors are used in conjunction with each other. So this palette is, in the context that are used on the homepage, the combinations should be accessible.
That's I love, and Kevin Powell said it too. Like I love the 600 and 200 like rule that
Yeah.
simplifies things in such a way that makes it really easy to work with and make sure that you're
Yeah, make sure that you're
yeah
doing the right thing, right? Like
yeah
because we don't want to just like and this really comes in handy with like grays as well. Like we want to make sure that like so gray in this case, gray 700 is a kind of our base text color, and then gray 600 is like our subdued color, right?
mm-hmm.
If we want something that's not quite as it, but that's still accessible on white or gray 200.
Got it.
And so we don't want to get like any lighter than that.
Got it. Couple comments. Thomas says switching to an HSL based system for color weights or lightness built with custom properties allowed me to not rely on lighten, darken, etc. from SCSS any longer. And then I saw Mac redeemed a stretch. So I got to stretch some more.
Me too.
Yeah, there we go. It applies to both. We're both getting in shape here, Mike. But yeah, that one thing that I struggled with, and I think that we could derail into colors and color palettes and stuff. But one thing I did struggle with is yellows and oranges. When you use
Yeah,
stuff like this, they turn out like
they get really brown.
poopy. They get poopy,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's tough to get like a good yellow with this kind of stuff. I mean, this isn't that bad. I don't know. Like I've definitely had it where sometimes you do like darken on a yellow and it's just like like
Well,
it
so
works on
like
red.
we have the yellow color in the front end horse palette, but we're using it on like a darker blue background, so
Hmm.
that blue 600 and yellow 400 combined are actually accessible.
Right.
So I think as long as you're not doing like yellow 400 on a white background, like you're good. So you just have to make sure that like you're using particularly with like yellows and oranges.
Right. Like here.
You can have them be light, but you just want to make sure it's like you're using a good background for that.
Cool. And Wilster points out that WebAIM has a full audit browser extension called Wave. It's pretty useful for seeing all those contrasts on the fly. That contrast tool is built into it too. It's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
WebAIM. Yeah, thanks, Will. Cool. So I this is making a lot of sense to me. Is that I mean I love that you included these tools so that people can
Hmm.
go back to them. The contrast grid. Did we check that one out yet?
Yeah, so
Wait.
this is your color palette. This is by Eight Shapes, which Nathan Curtis is one of the I think the founders of that. He's like a prolific writer on the topic of design systems. A lot of great stuff on his Medium. But essentially, this is your entire color palette and every combination of each
Holy
color. So
shit! This is
obviously,
great.
obviously, we're not going to use all of these different combinations. Like we're not going to use like yellow text on a, on a lighter yellow background or anything like that. But this helps you kind of visualize like where each combination is, and so you can kind of tokenize these right in the design
Yeah.
tokens of like
Wow.
here's these different color combinations.
This is a phenomenal resource. I've never seen this. This is really cool. The fact that you just pop these in and then save it here and link people to it, that is
Yeah,
phenomenal.
it just puts all your stuff in the query string, so
Yeah.
you can easily like link to that specific palette. It's
That
nice.
is so handy. And this is great to hand to like as you said at the start of the show is like there are so many people that are going to be using these colors and using the fonts and just essentially using the design system, whether it's on iOS, Android, web, or even print, right? Like
Yeah.
it there's, depending on what the company is, there's lots of people handling this stuff, PowerPoint presentations, right? Like on and on and on. Being able to send them this or just have this in like your documentation, like in a Notion doc, like here's our colors. Before you do
Hmm.
something, check this out and make sure that you're not doing this, right? Like
Yeah.
just make sure
Right.
because yeah, that's a phenomenal resource. That's really cool. Oh man. Um, cool. So we checked out colors. Was there anything else that we wanted to get into with the colors?
No, that's pretty much it. So that's kind of how I got
Yeah.
to those colors. So largely like some of those colors I tweaked a little bit to get them to work. Um, Others I just left them alone and just picked out the one that was accessible. Like I think the green I didn't have to do anything with that.
Cool.
Um, and so like when you start applying these things to the existing one, it becomes if you do it well, it becomes hard to tell the difference between like what the new red 600 is and what the old one, or sorry, I guess the red 400, right,
Yeah.
was the brand color.
Yeah.
Um, and what the old one is. Like it's very slightly tweaked just so that it passed on the yellow 100 background at large type.
Got it.
So
Oh.
yeah,
So this is yeah. So like I've my
that's
own
like the page background.
yeah. I've got like my own names for the colors just because I don't have any other hobbies. So that's like off white. Fun fact:
Mhm.
this is peppermint. So I mean I can tell you
I
all
knew
my
that, but
friends.
like I keep it like let's say you wanted to
Yeah. No.
change
I
and
know. And peppermint
this
doesn't
happened at
help.
Groupon,
It doesn't help.
right? Yeah. This
It's
happened at
no.
Groupon, right? Like we had our brand color and we tweaked it, right? And so like if you have like ours wasn't like a drastic change, but like if you call your thing, aqua and then you tweak it and it becomes more of like a teal or something like
Yep.
that, then you have to go into your system and like rename everything. So if you just call it like this is red, this is blue,
Yeah.
this is green, right? And give it a number. Like if we want to change blue to like a completely different shade, it's not that hard.
You know. I did have to. I couldn't help it. But yeah, no, the red 600 for the 600 and 200 accessibility trick alone is well worth it. But also just as you start to have a full palette, it makes it way easier to know what's darker and lighter. So no,
Yep.
this is fantastic. Cool. So do we want to go to type next or
Yeah, let's jump right in. So here, if you go back to the CSS stats and scroll down to the type section,
okay?
you'll see we have 23 unique font sizes, right?
That is a
So
lot.
yeah, and this is common on a lot of sites, right? It's just a matter of like particularly if you have more than one designer, If you don't have a system, they're just like eyeballing stuff until it looks right. And then you
Right.
you end up with like literally every pixel size from like in our case 11 pixels, which is not super legible, all
Right.
the way up to like 10 em, right? And so you
Yeah.
have 12 pixels, 13 pixels, 14 pixels, 15 pixels, right? And so it becomes really hard to create a clear hierarchy. And so what I like to do is like I'll usually narrow it down to like maybe 4 or 5 heading styles, headings like sizes, and then maybe 3 or 4 body text sizes. And maybe there's a little bit of overlap there, like maybe the smallest header is the same size as the largest body text size, or maybe a little smaller.
Got it.
Um, but then like we're able to, if you go back to our doc, we're able to narrow that down to like I think 9 sizes, so 5 heading
Okay.
styles and three body text styles, so eight different. Oh no, yeah, you have
4.
four. So 9 different styles
That's
from
still
23
better.
sizes to 9. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so you end up with like a clearer hierarchy of from your headings and also your body text. And then you can use things like, and so in this case, I applied the brand color to the headings just to kind of make it stand out.
Yeah.
But really, like our heading styles are just uh really determining like the font size and the line height. And in this case, like uh I didn't have a ton of time, so I just made the line height like 1.1 on headings and 1.5 on body text. But we
Cool.
could go in and we could like tweak that, right?
That's what
But
I
we
do
have
too. So
yeah, I
this
mean,
matches
you
well.
could totally
That's
you
gonna
could
go.
totally tweak it. Um, because you get like you get these weird like kind of half pixels and stuff in there, and I like to like kind of tighten that up a little bit. And also I try and make the line heights kind of align with my spacing values so that you get a nice like vertical rhythm.
S-
But
So
this is
this is
like
the line
quick and
height,
dirt.
right?
Yeah, this is
Got
just
it.
like a quick and dirty thing. And so we can kind of like further create hierarchy by adjusting the color and the uh, uh, the spacing between text, right? So like instead of like having all these different 23 different text sizes, we can create the illusion of hierarchy by having two things that are the same size, but maybe one is using the like the uh,
The brand
subtle
color.
color, right?
Okay.
So like you have the body text color and then you have the subtle text color, and it's the same size, but it looks less important because it's not as, dark, for
Yeah.
example.
Doesn't
Um,
stand out as much.
so yeah, I don't have a ton of like links here for text.
Yeah.
There's a few cool tools. One is called Grid Lover. I think it's gridlover.net. And it's kind of a cool tool to like visualize your click on the try grid lover button, and it helps
Whoa.
kind of visualize like your styles. You can there's a little drop down on the kind of top right, um, where you can do like perfect fifth and all these different crazy scales. Um, and
Huh.
but the one thing I don't like is that it gives you these crazy like rem values and kind of half pixels. So I kind of like to manually do the size and line heights
Should it be
instead of
applying or do I have to hit something? Because it's not like moving
uh
this.
I don't recall. I haven't used it in a while, but
Got it.
I feel like it should be updating, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's interesting.
But yeah, it's kind of an interesting tool to just kind of visualize the
Yeah.
vertical rhythm with your type.
Yeah. Just gotta figure out how
But
to make it move. Let me try it one more time.
I tend to like on my side projects, I tend to just reuse the same sizes,
Got it.
and just change up the font family.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Again,
I'll
I didn't
see
go to
if we can.
design school, so
Yeah, I actually did, but it was a 2-year community college course. So
hey, I went to
I,
community college too, so
yeah, yeah. I
nothing
just,
wrong with community college.
it is a very, very good way to save a whole lot of money.
Yeah, why spend like 5 grand to take like English 101 when you could do it for like a couple $100 and get the
Yeah,
same credit?
yeah. And you get to live in your parents' basement and not go off to college and have fun with everyone else. Like this, these people are so ridiculous having fun, going to parties every weekend. They didn't get to
Who
hang with my
wants to do
mom.
that?
So we can spend the
There you
rest of the
go.
time. We have about an hour left. We can talk about this now. All right.
Great.
No, cool.
Uh, so yeah,
So
let's dig into spacing.
I'll drop Grid Lover into the chat. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, spacing.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say
So
anything because I know I'm gonna say something wrong. I'm curious your not your take on
yeah,
spacing. I know you're for it, but yeah, I'm excited to
is
learn
there
from
is
you.
there a, is there a
Oh, so many.
against spacing?
Yeah, just just put everything up next to each other. Honestly,
Just remove margins for everything.
yeah. Let's just. I mean,
Um,
save paper,
so
right?
actually,
Just put everything.
that's kind of like in the way that I architect CSS, like just take all the margins off of stuff and like kind of apply margins as utility classes. So because a lot of times um the way I approach CSS, and I think a lot of people who work with CSS a lot are kind of coming to this conclusion, right? Like Andy Bell's Cube CSS, which I have linked here.
Cool.
Um, we went from kind of doing a lot of BEM, right? The block element modifier
Yep.
kind of method to kind of like the opposite of that would be like something like Tailwind, right? That's utility only, right?
Right.
And so we're kind of coming to this thing that's in between where our components are styled, like a button has all of its styles encapsulated inside of one class, but then we can use utilities to control spacing, to control layout, like with Flexbox and things like that. And so that we're not our system isn't like getting bloated with all these different contexts of how we use these things, right?
Right.
So the example I give is like an e-commerce site has a product card, right?
Right.
Which in the case of front end horse, our product card is like the articles, right?
Right.
And so you might have your image, your headline, your description, and then your kind of meta information at the bottom. And so like in a BEM world, right, you might call this card, and then your image is like card image, card title, card subtitle, card meta, something like that, right?
Right.
Um, but then if you're working in a large organization and there's different verticals maybe that are creating different types
Cards.
of cards,
Yeah.
right? Different layouts, different content, then they're adding new classes that are like this is a getaways card, this is a goods card, and then it has different stuff inside. So rather than that, like the way that I do it is like the card class just describes what the shape of the card is. Does it have border radius? Does it have a drop shadow when you hover it? Um, is there a background color to it? And then everything else is just like, this is just an image, right? Maybe there's some class applied to that to do something to it. This is just a header component, right?
Right.
Uh, and then this is just text, right? And then we can apply modifiers to it to like change the color. We can apply utilities to adjust the padding inside of the card, the margins between items in the card. But those are all utilities. We don't have to make new stuff to create a variation of this card. We can just use existing styles to like recompose it in different ways and maintain those like card styles, right? The outer shell of the card.
Now, it makes a lot of sense to use those utility classes in order to create that spacing. So
Hmm.
yeah, because that's a thing that I always struggle with, honestly. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't have a lot to add. I think I'm just talking because you stopped talking, so now it's my turn to fill the air. But yeah, I just agree, and I think that really I don't know a lot of the acronyms that you're saying, Thomas. I do bio, BEM, it CSS, OOCSS, plus
I don't know what
SMAX.
bio is.
Okay, I
ITCSS
think
sounds familiar.
I think bio is BEM.
Object-oriented CSS is I think Nicole Sullivan
Okay,
created that.
so
SMAX, a lot of the architecture of our CSS in on this front end horse project is using a kind of a variation of SMAX. But like these aren't like these are all like interchangeable or not interchangeable, but like they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like you can use
okay.
SMAX and BEM and atomic design, right? They're all methodologies, but they're kind of doing different things, right? And then you have Andy's CubeCSS,
Right.
which I kind of created my own kind of version of that called CoolCSS, right? Which stands for Component Layout, Component Utility, U being the U, and layout. So we have our component classes. We have our utility classes that help us kind of modify or arrange those components. And then layout, instead of having like a generic 12 column grid, we're just creating specific layouts for each page. Because most sites, they might use like 2 or 3 different page layouts and just dump content in those various sections, right?
Right.
We don't need the thing with these 12 column grids is like it's meant to do anything for anyone, right? Where we're trying to make something kind of bespoke to like what we need specifically for to make this page, right?
Right. Because we can.
Um,
It saves a lot of code. It just makes
yeah,
things better. It makes going responsive a lot easier if you're not worrying about this
yeah.
12 column grid.
Developers tend to struggle with taking a picture of a website and putting it into a 12 column grid, particularly like if the grid starts getting nested, right? It just creates all these problems. So like having like just a thing that you can do and then having utilities that allow you to do flexbox on stuff. Um, and I don't know like how long we're going today, but like I think eventually we'll want to at least look at like how
Yeah.
that works like
So
in the code.
I was planning on going another 50 minutes. Is that cool with you?
Yeah. I
Cool.
mean, I got all day, Alex. It's
All
just a
right.
matter
I
of like
mean,
how long you want to go.
how long does
Uh,
chat want to stay here?
that's right.
Uh, Kevin Powell says, time for the generic 12 column layout to die, in my opinion. I agree.
Yeah, we
Um,
talked about this site that I'm sure Kevin's seen this already, but it was gridless design, I think.
yeah, that's
I
that's
have it linked.
interesting.
I have it linked in that document, like towards the bottom. But he made a great case for like A, why we have these grids, and B, why we should get rid of it. I think it's just a little further up. There's a layout
There we
section.
go.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Gridless.design. Great site, great content. I wholeheartedly agree. Um, but I think like, we're starting to align around this middle ground between utility first and like what I call cool CSS utility also, right? Like it's not just utilities,
Right.
it's like components and utilities, right? And then all of that kind of fits within these layouts.
I think that's great.
So with spacing, going back to spacing, I mentioned Nathan Curtis earlier. Probably the article of his that I refer most back to is the space and design systems, and he kind of develops this terminology for all of these different types of margins and padding, which I have in that document, kind of more briefly summarized. But he kind of talks about like how to come up with these spacing values. Um, and how to kind of communicate them in our designs, right? Like how do we illustrate these to developers so that they know which types of spacing to use? And so I lean heavily on this as far as like how I come up with the spacing values, how far apart the values are. Um, uh, like typically I'll use like kind of like multiples of 4. But I noticed like all of your existing spacing was like multiples of 10 basically. So
Really?
I just kept that, which is fine. Like, there's nothing
Weird.
wrong with that. At least you're consistent about it. Like it was largely, 10,
Huh.
15, 20, 40, 80. And so we pretty much kept that. The reason I like to do multiples of 4 is just because like screen sizes are typically multiples of 4, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it makes it
And it
easier to
and it
kind of like
ties into
break stuff
REMs
down.
well. Yeah, no, honestly, it's
Yeah.
funny you're saying that because I thought I was using like a eight pixel grid. It just shows
Well, you're
I
not.
don't know what the hell's going on my site.
Yeah,
So
that's okay.
oh
None
well,
of, none of us do.
let's drag it into the light. This is all so
None
useful
of us
and
do.
helpful. And I think it's probably um a good use case or like a good one to hit because it's like I think it's fine, but clearly it's not, right? There's
Well,
some
so the other
skeletons.
argument for a base 4 is like if your system is supporting iOS and Android, like some of the way that they lay stuff out is like, you know, they're using like base 4
Okay.
measurements as well. So
But yeah.
and Nino likes multiples of 4. So
I agree with
I mean,
Thomas. Yeah, like
that's enough. That's enough for me.
no joke, at my old at the agency I worked at before now, I advocated that the design team only work in 8 pixel grids, and then I go and I make my site and I'm like,
Boy,
we can't use 10 pixels, people. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that's what
I
happens when
thought I
you
knew
use
you, Alex, and now
this.
you're just
You use utility classes that you don't write yourself, and this is what happens. You get egg on your face.
right.
Oh no, I said the word. That was the IRL banned word that I wasn't allowed to say. I think the time's passed though, but you get egg on your
It's just
face
like
later.
Pee Wee's Playhouse here.
Something like
It's
that.
like the
Yeah.
secret word. So yeah, let's go back to the spacing. So yeah, those are the spacing values I came up with. I kept it really small so that, these values, like the further apart you keep them, like the clearer the hierarchy is between, sections and between stuff. You can see like how closely things are related. Um, we could have added some in there. Um, but
Yeah.
for the purposes of generating the homepage of Front End Horse, this worked out. So
Awesome.
I talked a little bit here, kind of briefly about the terminology. So
Ooh.
stack being like vertical, the vertical spacing between things. Andy Bell and CubeCSS has this like flow thing. So like rather than adding like a block utility on every single paragraph, you can just put a flow utility on the container, and it gives you consistent bottom margins on every child of that container.
Does that
So
use
that's
like
another utility.
the owl thing? Is use the two asterisks and the plus?
Kind of.
Okay.
It can. The way that I do it is I just say, if you have a flow class, then all of the direct children that I basically just do direct children, right? So the greater than, and then the pseudo selector, not not, and then inside of the parentheses, colon last
Last
child,
child.
right? So
Cool.
everything except the last child should have bottom margin. So I try to apply all the margins to the bottom and the right of everything except
Right.
for the last child, just to prevent like margin collapsing and things like that. So I try to just avoid adding like top margins to things, so everything just kind of like flows down the page.
Nice.
Um,
Real quick from
yep.
Thomas, he says the 12 column grid
Mhm.
is great because it allows for distribution in 3, 6, and 9 columns very easily. There's a reason for why the 12 column grid remained for so long, plus back when 12 columns in a 960 pixel layout. Oh man, that's bringing back some memories. 960
Are we gonna have to
pixels.
get out the band hammer again, Alex? No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Are exactly
Definitely
80
Nino,
pixels per
Nino, read
column. That
that
makes
read
sense.
that gridless design, and maybe you'll change your mind. That's all I'll say about that.
I
Um,
think Thomas is just saying, like, in
yeah, I
fairness,
think
the
it's great.
reason why
It's
the
great
12 column
because you
grid
can,
is
yeah,
around.
yeah.
Yeah. I
And
don't.
I think when the 960 grid came out, we didn't have responsive yet, right? And so everyone was just making a fixed 960 thing,
Right.
right? And so it was very easy to kind of adhere to that. But yeah,
Yeah,
um,
Thomas is
no,
on
very
board. We
good.
don't have to ban him. I mean,
All right,
but
whew,
Thomas, don't
dodged a
try to
bullet there.
bring in other opinions here. Don't.
Yeah,
If you do that
no
again,
devil's
you keep
advocate
doing
here.
that. Yeah, no, no. But I think Thomas brings up a great point. It's not just like, oh, well, there's 12 eggs in a dozen, so let's do 12 column grid, right? Like there was a specific reason behind it. I think you bring up a really good point. And I think it
Oh,
makes sense for a lot of
also great
people.
point here. He says that he believes terminology is the most underrated part of design systems, and really, that's like one of the most challenging things. Is just like agreeing between, like, why I say that design systems are an agreement between design
Hmm.
engineering and product, because we're coming up with this taxonomy of like, what do we call this shit, right? That maybe on Android it's a toast, and maybe on web it's a popover, and like how do we like agree on what do we call this thing in our system so that we can replicate it,
Right.
and we're all talking about the same thing, right? So some of that stuff is like platform specific, right? But we can call it the same thing within our system.
That makes sense. And does this come into it, like the stack, the flow, like those are those
I mean, for
specific
me, that
terms?
just like helps to define, like describe it to people, right?
Right.
Particularly when you're using these as utilities. Um, it helps you kind of visualize those things. So inline being like horizontal margins, right? Like left and right margins, and then inset being the padding.
Right.
And then within inset, you can have like in Nathan calls these excuse me, inset square, right? Meaning same padding on all four sides.
Oh, that's
Inset
handy.
squish, right? Like this, less
Oh,
padding on the top and bottom than on the sides, and then stretch, which is the opposite. So more padding on the side, on sorry, on the top and bottom than on the sides.
got
Um,
it. Abdel,
and
thank
so
you
I
for
have a
following.
bunch of
Sorry,
I
sorry.
have a bunch of utilities. Yeah, no worries. A bunch of utilities that kind of help, replicate that in code.
That's really clever. Yeah, even those terms of like square and squish is it, that puts a name to something that I'm otherwise explaining in not clear terminology, and I think it goes back to what Thomas said
Yeah.
of,
I
um,
always I always lean on other people. Like if they came up with a name for it, I'm like, yep, that makes sense. Like I
yeah,
don't have to come up with a name with it now. I'll just borrow somebody else's.
no, it's
So
perfect.
certainly, like my kind of whole methodology on design systems is informed by a ton of people. One of the things I love about just the web in general is that like people, this is really unlike any other industry where people are so generous with their knowledge and their time and sharing what they've learned. Like you don't see, um, people who direct movies like sharing tips about, here's how I did this shot, It's like that's kind of like their secret, right? Like their
Yeah,
secret sauce. You don't see chefs saying like, "Hey, here's how I made this awesome, rack of lamb or whatever."
I mean, there's
But
recipe books, but sure, no.
yeah, there's recipes, but
Just play it.
but I mean like, people who are,
Yeah.
the top chefs aren't, spilling the beans, right? So to
No,
speak.
it's great, and honestly, I have an entire Twitch stream around that entire concept of like
Yeah.
people are
And
really
really
friendly
like
and they want to share, so let's have
that's
them
how
on.
that's how I went from being a sports journalism major to like being a design systems person, right? I just learned from all these people who, you know, just pulled a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and
Yeah,
kind of made it into this its own thing, right?
it's cool.
So
Um,
I talked about like kind of these three pillars being color, type, and spacing, right? We
cool.
talked about those, and then icons are kind of like the fourth one, right?
Okay.
The fourth of three. So a lot of sites have like a ton of icons in the UI. Uh, Fortunately, the front page of Front End Horse really just has the arrow and the social icons, so
Yeah,
that was really easy to do.
that's at the
Um,
bottom.
so the way I approach icons is I use like an SVG sprite, and we're able to include that kind of at the beginning of each page, and then we can call instances of those icons with the use element. Um, and this lets us like style all of those instances individually without like dropping in, an external link to an SVG for each image or the SVG code itself. We can just kind of like call instances of it, right?
Got it.
And then yeah, so and then in instances like with the arrow, because that was like a style, right? Like if you go to the front end horse page and look at like a card, you'll see an example of the arrow where it says uh I
Read
can't even
article.
read it, it's so small.
Sorry,
Read
it says
article,
read article. Yeah.
right? So I created a class that has an after element uh that uses the icon as a background image, right? So we're able and then I use the SVG URL encoder. I basically just dropped the link in there and it created the
Got
background
it.
image for me. And then I can adjust the fill color. And so what that lets me do is like I can add icons uh to components,
To
right?
elements
Without
just in the DOM. Not
Yeah,
putting a
right,
class on there.
exactly. It's
Wow.
just it's just text. So things like a common thing is like a search bar, right? The search element has the little magnifying glass in the input. We can just kind of embed that in there by URL encoding it. And then there's other stuff like the social icons where we would just use the use element and pull those in from the sprite.
Right. So just to go back to the arrow thing, because I think that's a really cool
Mhm.
technique. Let's make sure I'm understanding it right. So what you would do, I'm just going to zoom this a bit. Um, you
Mhm.
wouldn't inline this SVG in like a there's a span for read article, and then there's an SVG element for the arrow, but instead you would put on the read article span or whatever it is a class of
Mhm.
like has arrow right icon or whatever you're calling it, and then
It's I
it
think it's
would.
called I think it's just called the class is just called ArrowLink.
Okay,
And so it's just basically adding that after pseudo
that's
element
really
with
clever.
the background image. And then because like it's decorational, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it doesn't add anything to like a screen reader to say read article arrow icon or
Right,
whatever, you know. And you can hide that, but you don't have to necessarily like have the actual image in there. It can just be a background image because
right.
it's just it's like an ornament essentially.
That makes complete sense to me. That's a really
Mhm.
smart technique. Cool.
So yeah, design tokens.
Nice. So
So like
yeah.
once we've done this audit and we've created all of these, we've narrowed down our decisions, right? We can kind of codify them in these design tokens. And so with my CSS, like I usually use Sass to do it because like you could certainly use CSS variables or custom properties, but like they don't necessarily need to be uh like adjusted on the fly. So so having them kind of pre-compiled with Sass for me works better
Before we dig
because
into
we're
it,
not.
can you
Yeah,
give us a definition of design tokens? Like, what are design tokens for if someone doesn't know?
sure. It's basically just like a variable, right? We're storing all of our design decisions in these variables. So our color palette, uh, we have like our red 600 equals some color value, right? Like an HSL value or a hex value. Um, and so I kind of have these. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. Um,
Oh, good.
yeah, it's fun having a toddler. Uh, So I have three levels of tokens, right?
Okay.
There's global tokens, which represents all the values in the system, all our color palette, our type sizes, our spacing values, things like border radius, border width. We can throw animations in there, things like timing functions,
Right.
animation durations, things like that.
Should be very
Pretty much
brand
anything you,
specific.
yeah, anything you would put in CSS, we could create a token of that, right? And a lot of companies just like stop there, right? Okay, we have these variables that represent all these things, but then when you want to replace one of those things, you have to go through your code base, and instead of finding a hex value, you have to find a token name, right?
Right.
And so having these three layers of tokens gives you uh, control over like which things you want to update, right? So if you scroll back down to the token section, the next thing is contextual tokens, right? And there's a
Okay.
lot of people who kind of do these layers, but maybe they call them different things. I call them contextual tokens because like um, we our colors, for example, like we have this color palette with all these different colors, but we only want to use them in specific contexts. We only want to use color XYZ for borders, right? We only want to use this for backgrounds. We only want to use this for text. So with contextual tokens, we can say, we can create a token called like color background brand,
Right.
right? Which is our red 400. And we can use that color background brand like for a button background or for, like a section background color, right? Um, and so if we want to update our brand color, maybe we just want to change the background color and not necessarily text color where the brand color is used or something like that, right? So the contextual tokens allow us to update a subset of our components, not necessarily like everything across the board, right? Every instance of a color, maybe just how it's used, right?
But
And
color
we
background
and
brand is basically a pointer back towards the brand color.
to
Is that right?
another token, right?
Right. To
So
a
color
global
background
token.
brand is pointing to color red 600. But maybe we decide that you know, the way that's being used isn't accessible, so we want to point it to color red 800 or something like that, right?
Got it.
Um,
Yes, this makes
and
complete
so
sense.
yeah, so then when we update color background brand, then everywhere it's used as a background gets updated and not we're not like changing a color value, right? Like our one of our
Right.
global color values.
And
So we
and
can be more selective about how we change colors.
Yeah, I like this a lot because this also takes the guesswork out of, all right, I need, a background with a brand color, and I've got this, and which one do I choose? Am I doing, like, am I doing
Right.
this or that? I'm just,
Yep.
I don't have to worry about that. That's abstracted away from me. I don't have to worry about
Right.
yellow 400 or
You're
500.
not picking colors, you're picking like you're applying existing tokens of like, okay, I
Right.
need a background color that's the brand. You don't have to guess what global value that is.
That's been decided
And
for
this
me.
also right, and that also helps us like we talked about earlier, like we have a yellow 400, but we don't want people using that for a background. We don't
Right.
want them using it for text color. It's specifically used in this case. We can define that in our tokens so that it doesn't get abused, right? Um,
Got it. So
so we have
it's going to
this,
be rare that I'm pushing code on the front end that's using a global token. These are more to um, inform these two types of
yeah,
tokens. Cool.
exactly. Not to say that you couldn't, like
Right.
there's some global tokens that are things like what's the maximum content width or what are our breakpoints, right? You
Got
can
it.
define those in your global tokens and they're not all necessarily going to be represented in on contextual tokens. They might just go directly into component tokens.
Got it.
So component tokens are like, let's say we have a button and a button has, it has a background color, it has a font size, a font family, padding, right? All these different visual styles. We can we can create component tokens that are like button background color. And maybe
Got
button
it.
background color translates to color background brand, which then in turn translates to color red 600, right? So component tokens allow us to control like individual component styles so that uh, really with these three layers of tokens, we can update the visual style of our site just by adjusting the tokens without touching any CSS, without
Right.
touching any markup, right? So kind of like if you think back to CSS Zen Garden, which
Or the new
our friend
iteration of it.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
yeah, our friend Stephanie with Style Stage,
Yeah.
where we're essentially like we have the same markup, but we're just changing the styles. This is taking it a step further, and the styles are being kind of determined by these tokens, and we can just update this token file. And so what that does is like it allows literally anybody in the company to like make these changes that affect, the entire experience. And particularly when you're working across different platforms and you're able to control those things without necessarily touching the code, it's incredibly valuable. So if you can do A/B testing, right? You want to try a new style for a button, right? You could do that with the tokens.
Got it.
Um, if you want to do a full scale redesign, you can do that through the tokens. There might be instances where you might have to change some markup because the way that it's arranged is different, but visually, maybe uh, we have a new font family or something like that, right? And
Right.
we can apply that. The other thing too is um, I forgot what I was going to say. I have a link here though to an article I wrote called Simple Groupon, where
Yeah.
theming. Theming was the other thing I was going to talk about. So this is a project I did at Groupon right before I left, where I basically recreated the deal page with design tokens, and then I was able to. This kind of just talks about the CSS
Yeah.
methodology, but I created these four different types of pages just using tokens. So in less than a day, really half a day, I made the other three versions of the deal page. So uh, Groupon owns Living Social, so we
Got
use
it.
the same content but have a different brand for Living
Okay.
Social. So we're able to, change the brand color to purple, change the buy button color from green to blue. And then I made a dark mode, which basically just tweaks some of the tokens
I
for
was going to
background
ask about
colors
dark
and
mode.
text
That
colors. Hmm.
Yeah. So that would happen
So you
up
could
at
do
the
that
global up in the global tokens, or would that happen somewhere else?
probably in contextual. So you could have
Okay.
like for dark mode, maybe your page background color is points to black instead of white, right?
Okay.
Um, and like with the tokens, you can basically have like your base tokens and then have another file that comes after that overrides certain tokens so that you're inheriting all of like your text styles, but maybe just your colors are changing. So you're
Got it.
only declaring like that these things are different in that theme. Um,
Okay.
and then the
Thomas,
final
yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna say, Thomas in the chat said it's separating the theme from the rest of the CSS for in terms of using design tokens, and then think design tokens equals theme provider. It's a really cool way
Yeah,
of
but
thinking
it
about
could
it.
it could go beyond your theme, right? Like we can anything that can be of value in CSS can be tokenized. So, like we talked a bit about like our animations, right? And maybe that's part of a theme too. Maybe all the
Yeah,
visual styles are amount to a theme.
we're all
Um,
themes,
we're
Mike.
we're all themes. We're just
Everything's a theme.
themes
Yep.
of the same template. Um, But yeah. So yeah, there's an article there by Andy Bell, What are Design Tokens? It does a great job of summarizing it. Um, Brad Frost Atomic Design, another
Right.
huge influence on the
Classic.
stuff that I've done. Good stuff. Brad's a good guy.
Yeah.
Shared some French fries with him before.
That's
Uh,
the weirdest name drop I've heard all day. That's
yeah. He
no,
we had him over to Groupon to talk to do a workshop, and we had dinner at this restaurant, and they had this thing called bro fries. And I said, Brad, do you want to split some bro fries? We'll be fry bros. He's like, yeah, okay. So Brad and I are
You're Fry
forever fry
Bros with
bros.
Brad Frost?
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Dude. I thought the
I don't
coolest
like
thing
the name
about
drop,
you
but
was
yeah,
the you have a second city certificate behind you,
that's right.
but
Yeah.
Fry Bros with Brad
Can't see it,
Frost
but
might be
it's
cooler.
back
Yeah.
there.
No, I don't know if anyone in the
Yeah.
chat knows who Second City is, or rather what it is, but it is a comedy troupe out in Chicago that is legendary.
I
Um,
can't imagine there's people. I mean,
there
maybe
definitely are. There
outside of
definitely are.
outside of the U.S., but
Yeah.
um,
Even in the
yeah.
U.S., I don't think Second City is as big anymore. And like, I don't know, people who aren't like big comedy fans. But anyway, we're getting off topic. That to me was the coolest part about you. But now it seems you buried the lead, so that's
Yeah.
pretty.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Uh, Components, yeah.
Yeah. Should we
So
move on to
this is
components?
now we're getting into the meat of like the CSS, right?
Okay.
So uh with the front page of Design Horse, we really only have like three components. Everything like aside from like text styles, the only real components are like our subscription thing, right? With our text input and our button,
Right.
and then our card style.
Right.
Everything else is like either a heading or some body text, or utility classes that kind of arrange it in a flexbox or a grid
Right.
or apply different colors and things to it. Um, and so, so when I came to Provi, the way we approached building the system was we let the product inform what went into the system. So instead of saying, okay, we're making a design system, we need modals, we need
We.
carousels, we need
Yeah.
XYZ,
Let's
like
make the
let the
tools and then
product.
find out what we're building later. It's like
Right.
no,
Like
let's. Yeah.
let the product dictate that,
Right.
right? So we have a feature, let's say our feature is this homepage, like we can just make the things we need to build this page. And then when we get to the article page, we'll probably need like a code sample. We'll need another type of menu, right? For the table of contents.
Right.
And we can add those things, but that second feature builds on the stuff that we built for the first feature, and every successive feature goes faster and faster because we've added these new things, right? And so it can be very overwhelming to think about like building a design system. But if you kind of keep that in mind of like, just start with the next feature. Maybe that feature is just a card, right? And we just want to make those styles for the card, which includes the color and the type,
Right. The
right?
type
And
things and the
maybe get
rounded,
some spacing.
the border
Yeah.
radius. Yeah.
And maybe that's your system, right? It's just cards. It's just a card system, right? But now all of our cards going forward are consistent,
Right.
right? Or start with a button, right? Okay, we have a very specific set of buttons on the site, and now anytime we use a button, it's using that button component that we built, and we don't have to like make a new button every time from like a picture of a button, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like how I approached it. And so yeah, every successive project just gets easier and easier to build because we're not creating new stuff. We're just figuring out how to rearrange the existing stuff in a way that makes that new thing.
It's kind of like you said with the Legos. I know you didn't like the analogy, but instead of I need to create an entire house. It's like, all right, here's the parts for the house. I just need to create that one hinge, this new weird hinge.
Yeah,
That's the only novel thing here. I'll focus on
right.
that. The rest is just bringing parts that we've already made. So that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Welcome, Bob. Good to see you. Um, yeah. So components. Yeah, it makes sense where you can just all design down to the most atomic level components. This goes back to atomic design. And just to anyone who's not familiar with atomic design, Brad Frost's thing is taking like atoms, which is like the label above an input and the actual input and the button, and building up from there into molecules, which would be like the input um, area, or I don't know, the contact form, or or no, it's like the search form, right? And then
Yeah,
up
so like
to,
actually
yeah.
if you go back to that, like our system, like when I first saw atomic design, a lot of people's inclination is to make this a component, right? Like let's make a search box component that
Mm-hmm.
includes all these things, which you can do, but that's like now you're getting into like feature territory, right?
Right.
Like this is a feature, right? If we abstract this down to just the atomic level stuff, we have this label style, we have this input style, we have this button style, and then we have utilities that allow us to apply a bottom margin to the label to align the button and the input next to each other, right? We don't necessarily have to create new styles to do this particular feature,
Right.
right? So by keeping things kind of at that atomic level, you can avoid having to be the source of truth for product decisions, right? There's a fine line between design decisions and like visual style decisions and product decisions, right? And if the design systems team starts being the keeper of product decisions, then it really becomes this huge albatross of like, now the design systems team is responsible for knowing about every iteration of a product card across these different verticals that's maintained by a dozen different product teams, all with their own kind of competing agendas and roadmaps and stuff, and it's too much to manage, right?
That
Like a
makes a
design
lot of
system in
sense.
itself is hard enough to manage. Well, just keeping track of all the components that you need, much less how they're arranged, right?
Right.
Like that shouldn't be the concern of the system.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I definitely would not have had that. I think I lean towards this being like a component, but I think what you just said makes so much sense.
And it
And
can be, right? Like
right.
maybe all three of these things are components, and then we have a larger component that's this thing that so that we can repeat it elsewhere in the site,
Right.
and that's fine. But that's not part of the system. That's part of the component library,
Right.
right? Which is
Exactly.
an implementation of the system, right? It's not the system itself. It's an implementation, just as the UI kit is an implementation of the system, right?
Right. And that I think is where I keep going, right. Component library, design system, that's kind of where those two
Yeah.
meet and one hands off to the other. So
Right. It's all, yeah, they're all implementations of the system, but the system itself is like
the
the
Bible
decisions and the
for it.
rules around it. It's
Right.
the source of truth, right? Which is for me that's the tokens, right? The tokens are what drives everything else, right?
Right. Cool. Um, so and then we have utilities. This is kind of going back to what you're talking about with CoolCSS, with CubeCSS, how these are going to
Hmm.
be for spacing
Yeah,
and for
basically,
layout.
yeah, just basically for changing like modifying the existing styles in some way or like applying different colors, different borders, things like that. And then just how do we arrange those things, whether that's like applying space between things or laying them out using Flexbox or Grid.
Right. Nice. And but then you
Not
say not to be confused with page layouts described below.
right.
And
Yeah.
then you recommend gridless design. Cool.
Yep.
Um,
So I have some design system tips there. I think I talked about I think I touched on a lot of those, but people can read those. I think we've got like 15 minutes. Like, do you want to just jump into the
Yeah,
horse?
let's
We'll
do
go
it.
straight to the horse.
Let's do
I
it.
thought maybe we could turn the pony into the horse, but that would just take too long.
Cool. So
Do
you've
we want to
got
show the pony and then we show the horse?
sure. How do I get to the pony? Is it slash pony?
It's yeah, you can just do slash pony. It's a link in the top of the thing, but
Oh, got it. Got it.
so
Okay.
this is just the markup, right?
Right.
So what I did was I just marked everything up semantically and then started writing all the classes I needed to make the horse, right? The completed page using the existing front end horse homepage as a reference, right?
Got it.
So basically went from pony to horse. Um,
I'll drop this in the
and
chat.
it's not quite as fancy as the actual site. There's a lot of cool animations and stuff going on the actual one. But I mean,
Yeah.
I built this in half a day. What do you want, Alex? You're not even
I
paying me,
want
so.
perfection, Mike. I want
Um, but you can see like how you know, if you were just to toggle between this and the actual site without
yeah,
hovering
scroll
over
up.
anything, uh, it would be very, you'd be.
Maybe make
It,
sure
it
the zoom
looks.
is the same. Hold on.
Yeah, I probably messed up something along the way, or you committed something since I last
Nope.
did it. But you know,
I have not committed anything in the last like 2 days.
I'm
So
kidding. I'm
I
kidding.
know.
I'm kidding. Uh,
It's
so
more of a joke on me. I
there's
didn't
going to
do
be
any work.
some discrepancies because
Yeah.
we narrowed down our choices,
Oh yeah.
right, to be more consistent. Um, but I mean, largely like this captures like the spirit of the site, right?
Yes, and I think
Um,
that's way more important than like this
like
is
pixel
supposed to be 10
precision,
pixels to the
right?
right. What's
Right.
going on?
And we can certainly like that stuff we can adjust, right? Like
Right.
we can combine our utility classes with like even though everything's in Sass, we can still use I still use CSS custom properties so that developers can override values. There's like maybe a default value, but then they can use those custom properties to say, change the max width to this, right? Or change the number of things that appear to this, right?
Right.
Um, using custom properties without having to add a new thing to the system.
Right. Um so what else should we look for the
Do we want to look?
differences here?
I mean,
Or just like yeah.
it's I think just like I think we've established like the spirit of it is similar, like
Yeah.
given the amount of time that I spent on it. But like let's go back to the docs. There's a link to the GitHub repo, and we can just kind of look at the code a little
Awesome.
bit
And
all
Thomas,
the way at
thank
the
you so
top.
much for being here. He says he's got to go. Yeah, thank you, Thomas, for being here. You were a phenomenal addition to
Yeah,
all the knowledge, all the questions, all the
lots of great
thoughts.
input.
Yeah, thank you,
Appreciate
Thomas.
it.
Always good to have you here. Okay, we're going to Design Systems repo here. Is that?
Yep. No. Sorry,
Nope.
all the way at the top.
My fault.
Uh,
Pony Horse GitHub repo. Got it.
there you go.
Cool.
So let's go
So
into source,
okay, I can drop this
and
real
then
quick. Let me just drop
I'm
this
gonna
in.
blow up my screen here.
Yeah, I'll make mine bigger. Thank you for reminding me.
There we go. So go into assets
Okay.
and then SCSS. And so you can see here, this is kind of like a sort of like SMACS methodology, right? So abstracts would include things like tokens. I have some a single Sass function in there.
Okay.
And then I think I have my URL encoded icons in that folder as well.
In
And then
abstracts, got it.
in abstracts. Yep. And then in yep. So actually, you can open up the tokens. We can take a look at that.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm not familiar with Smacks. I've never used it. I don't really know much
Max
about
is
it.
basically it's just like a way of organizing your CSS.
Okay.
So we can look at like kind of how this all gets pulled into a single CSS file in
Okay.
a second. But the way I do cool CSS, so the idea behind cool CSS is like I'm constantly writing these CSS frameworks, and
Right.
I'm constantly like repeating a lot of things. So I wanted to make this CSS framework where I could just go into the tokens and change the prefix for. So this prefix, all of our CSS classes are prefixed with FH for front end horse,
Oh,
right?
nice.
But like I could use this same framework in for fizz and just change the prefix to fizz, and maybe I need different, I need different classes to support that product. But like things like buttons, I can just control the visual style through these tokens, right? So I have here like our
Sorry,
color
where
palette.
does the
Yep.
FH get added in? I know it's a prefix, but does it get
Yeah. So
added
if
for
you if you pop out of this file, go up one level, go into like components, for example, and then buttons. So you see how
Ah,
instead of it saying FH, I'm just saying prefix, right? So
right.
whatever I call this thing, dash button, and these are the button styles. So our
That's
class is
cool.
FH dash button, right? But if I'm over on dogs of dev and I need a button, I just change the prefix to like DOD
Right.
button, right?
Can someone
And
drop the
so
link
this
to Dogs of Dev, by the way? That's Mike's site and it's fantastic. Please drop that link in there
oh,
if you have
wrong
it.
side, this side.
Yeah, it's
There it
so
is.
good.
Dogs of dev. If you have a dog, send me their picture.
Hmm.
Um, but like the idea of prefixing these is like
Just
if you're
one
working
sec,
in
Mike. One sec. Sorry,
yep.
you're breaking up. You're sounding robot-y for me. I'm making sure that it's
Uh-oh.
not. Might be my internet. Let me just make sure that this is the priority thing. I don't wanna have you drop some knowledge and it be wasted as a robot. Trust Tower, prioritize. Cool. Let me just make sure that's it. All right. Can you give me oh, it sounds good in
Ed,
stream. Okay. Interesting.
Ed says it's good.
Might have been me. Okay.
It's just you, Alex.
It's just me.
Uh,
I am a robot, so secrets
so the
out.
the prefixing is basically like if you're working in an existing code base, the prefix helps kind of keep those styles encapsulated in that thing so that they're not conflicting
Yep.
with the existing styles, right?
Makes perfect sense. I just I couldn't picture how you were doing it, so just
Mhm.
seeing it, just popping out to see it helped. Um,
Yeah. So yeah, let's dig back into the tokens real quick.
awesome.
Oh, thank you for
Thank
dropping
you,
the link there.
full pixes. Appreciate it.
It's funny. I'm not a cat person, but because of sheer demand, I tried to register shortly after Cats of
Okay.
Dev, and
Okay.
someone swiped it from me,
That's
and
rude.
they didn't
That's
do any.
rude.
They didn't even do anything with it. That's what pissed me off.
Ah, see, they knew that's frustrating.
Ah,
I was
so
afraid for a
bad.
second. I thought you were going to say, due to popular demand, I started letting cats on my site, and I was going to be
No, no,
horrified. It's
no.
going to say,
I was
Mike,
gonna have a whole
does
separate
the
cat
name
site.
mean nothing? Yeah, that I'm okay
Yeah.
with. But if you start letting cats
Some
on,
people take it
what's
a little
next?
too yeah. Some people
Five,
take it a little too literally.
lizards?
Like it's really dogs of all people who create websites in any capacity. So design,
Yes.
dev, what have you. Product, sure, why
Yeah.
not? I'll take a
Or
picture of a
someone's
dog.
friend.
I'm
If
not,
you say like, that's
yeah.
my dog, Mark, over
I don't
there.
need to see papers or anything. Just
No.
let's, I just want
Yeah.
pictures of dogs. But some designers go to the site and they're like, oh, it's dogs of dev. I'm out. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, give me your dog.
Give me your
Anyway,
dog.
anyway.
Cool.
Uh,
So we've
so
got our colors. These are the global tokens. I love how you've organized this.
yeah, yeah. We got our hex values there in case you need to grab those.
That's
Sometimes,
really handy.
it's
Yeah.
commented out. Same with pixel values. Like some
Right.
people are like, what the hell's 3.75 M's, right? Or rems. And so I put I comment in the actual like translations there to make it a little
This is super
easier.
handy when going between Figma and
Hmm.
anything because I don't think Figma can do rems. I've never seen like it would kind of
Yeah.
make sense for it to not
That's
because
the
it
problem with design tools is that it's still not, it's not the
yeah
browser. So
right.
you can do a lot of things in Figma that the browser just can't do, right?
It's
And
catching
vice
up.
versa.
Yeah, yeah. Figma's getting a lot better. Like they have Flexbox and everything in there now, but it's not like a one-to-one yet. So this is definitely handy to have for when you're like, all right, it says 45 pixels in Figma. What is it actually? So
Well,
uh,
I'll tell you about my secret project later in chat. But
sounds good. All right, joining the Discord for that secret project. I
yeah,
love this, Mike. I really appreciate this teaser
so
to
yeah,
get people to join our
this
awesome
this
Discord.
is this is like all of our design decisions, right? And then
Yep.
if you keep scrolling down, we have our spacing values. We've got like border radius,
Yeah.
border width, timing functions, durations, scaling
Nice.
values. right? So that we're
That's
not just like
great. So
we're not
that's my little
arbitrarily
like
picking these
bouncy.
things.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're not just arbitrarily picking things. These are all like codified in our tokens, right? And then we start getting into contextual tokens where we have like our default body text. Inverse means like on a dark background, what color should the font be? Subdued is like a lighter color of our default text. We've got our brand text. Brand text large is a lighter color that's less accessible, so it should only be used on large fonts. Um, we have our accent color, which is the blue. Text accent inverse is the color of the font on the accent background, basically.
Got
These
it.
naming things are like, I'm just pulling this stuff out of my ass. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can call it whatever you want, but
Yeah.
you kind of like get the idea. I try and make something that makes sense to designers and developers. And sometimes we have conversations around that, like what should we call this? Other times I'm just like, let's call it this. And everybody's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about working at a startup. There's less people that you have to convince to like do something a certain way.
It doesn't need
We
three
just,
meetings in order
you don't
to
have
say
you don't
what
have a
color
2 hour
background light
meeting
is.
about a button, right?
Right.
It's just like, should it be blue? Yeah, okay, cool.
Blue's good.
Boom. One thing I'll quickly share, great conflict resolution technique that I learned. If you're in a meeting and you get into a disagreement about how we should do a certain thing, what a thing should look like, just stop what you're doing and say, how passionately do you feel about this on a scale of 1 to 5? And if the person is a 4 and you're like a 2, just use their
Take the
thing and
L.
move on.
Take the
That's it.
opposite.
Just
All
say,
right.
okay,
You
we'll do it
you
your
win
way.
it. Yeah.
If you don't feel passionately about it, like, all right, let's just do it your way. That's fine. That has saved me so many arguments.
That makes a lot of
Because
sense.
most things I'm just like, that's fine. I'm not gonna, that's not a hill I'm gonna die on,
That's my phrase exactly. I'm like, that's not a hill I'm dying on. Sure, go for it. And then
hmm
there's other ones where I'm like, no, this is happening. I'm not letting this one go. I'm gonna be annoying on that one.
So
Um,
yeah, then we start getting into component tokens. So basically, all of our heading, font size and line height combos are there, and everything else, our margins and stuff like that, gets added via utility classes. So
got
one
it.
thing I do in my CSS is to actually set the value of header elements to inherit for the font, right? So that all of the visual styles of header elements by default are reset. So this separates like the semantics of a header from the visual styles, because a lot of times people will choose an H3 for the visual styles, because I need this to be bigger than this, so I'm going to make it an
Yes.
H3. And so by applying those via a class instead of having those styles come from the browser, like it kind of forces you to make the correct semantic choice. Because like if you were to inspect the docs, you would see I use a lot of H3s, but the heading class is like a heading 4, for example. Um,
It's
and so
H3.
like
Yeah.
so like
Got
right
it.
there, you got a H2 with a heading 3 style, right?
Right.
Or H3 with a heading 4 style. So that it's not, I'm not choosing it based on the style. I'm choosing it based on semantically what's correct, and then I can apply whatever style to it.
Makes sense.
Um, so that's, yeah, a little trick that I learned.
Yeah. I just really
Yeah,
love that this kind of like bubbles up. So like heading font size
yeah,
largest goes up to one of the contextual wait, no,
yeah.
or does it not?
No,
It
it
goes up to
does.
one of the global ones.
Oh, it goes all the way up to global. Yeah.
Cool. Still, yeah, but still, like I love how it's referencing that global token, and
Because
it's
then, like, if we wanted to change our scale,
right.
we could do that and just modify these component tokens, right? And maybe there's other components that are using a heading style.
Right.
Probably not, but
And at first blush, it seems like why would I do heading to line height when I can just
it
do
seems like
like
a lot, and it seems really verbose. And this is another reason why I like using Sass, because like all this stuff just gets translated to like, 1.5, right?
right.
Like you're not with CSS custom properties, you're like the verbosity is baked in, right? And so having that pre-processed is like really helpful to me.
Yeah, but it's also just I think this part, the color accent
hmm
inverse, the color background brand, that for me is just completely taking away um the day to day, every few minutes making a decision that I shouldn't have to make, and
Right.
potentially choosing something that's inaccessible, where like
Yep.
because it's baked into to this naming convention and because we've already thought about it ahead of time, I'm not going to ship something that is inaccessible, and I'm also not going to spend a lot of time trying to remember, was it Red 600 or Red 500? Let me go check the Figma file, right? Like
Right.
VS Code's autocomplete is going to help me out here.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to get that shipped
So
way quicker.
with our design system, like because we have this UI kit, like you should never be having to like rely on Figma's styles to inform like what goes in the component. Like we're naming our layers. If we have a button, the button's layer name is, in our case, FH button, right?
Right.
And so it's not just layer and then I have to figure out what the styles are. I can just say if there's a layer called FH button, that means there's a component called FH button, and I could just use that. I don't have to like translate styles at all. Um, so that's kind of like how we solve that. There's less like looking at individual visual styles in a Figma doc.
Right.
We're just grabbing it's just informing like which component should we use, which class names should we use.
I having so like I came from an agency as my job before Prismic, and man, that would have been just so nice to not have to kind of keep, because like yes, Figma and Sketch, all those products have made it very easy, or easier than it used to be with like Photoshop, having to go like, all right, what am I, like when you actually look at something in Figma, it says like display, flex, font size, this, like it gives you CSS. That's helpful, but I think we all know it still has its limitations. You can't just kind of go through and, oh, I'm copying and pasting from Figma, my
Yeah.
job's done, I don't have to do anything. Being able to just run from the design system uh, would save so much time. I have a question. Having
Mhm.
felt that pain, do you think that, say, in an agency needs to make a website for a local brewery or a local clothing brand, you name it, right? Like
Yeah.
so, like medium small budget, or even like medium to large budget, but it's just gonna be like a website. We're gonna spend a month on it. The designer's gonna ship you some Figma docs. We're gonna make it in Gatsby and whatever else, right?
Right.
Do you think on a project like that where we're going to ship it and then we're going to say bye bye, do you think a design system um, is still a good use case, that it would
Yes.
still be something that you should pitch and should push for, despite the fact that it's not something that we're going to be living in, breathing in, like existing in the whole time? Ben just rated with a whole party of 10. Ben,
Hey,
thank you so
Ben's here.
much. Hey, Ben, I really appreciate that raid. Welcome everyone. We're just talking design systems. Um,
So I feel like this would be really valuable at an agency because if you consider like how fast I was able to build this, right? It's because I have this framework where I can just tack on a prefix that's specific to the project, and I don't have to necessarily write new markup for a button. I can just change all of the visual styles through these
oh,
tokens, right? So, let's say we built out all of the stuff we needed for front end horse, and now Ben hires us to redo semantics, right?
right,
The semantics website. Um, we can take this framework that we have and just adjust the. We're going to be using a lot of those same patterns, right? Maybe not all of them. We can kind of
right,
trim stuff, add new stuff as needed. But we have all of our design tokens. We're just putting in a new palette. We're putting in like exactly this is a great reference, Alex. Like we're putting in a new font family. Maybe we're squaring off the border radius. We're changing button colors,
right,
things like that, right? And so we can just crank out websites left and right. But like at the end of the day, the client doesn't know that this took us a day, right?
right,
For all they know, it took us 2 weeks, and we charge them. We're charging them for the value that we're delivering and not how long it took us to build that thing, right?
Right.
And
We're
that's
not
always been
charging
my
hourly.
approach.
We're charging by
Right.
the actual value that we, yeah.
Right. And that's like how I've approached my career as well. Like, uh, I'm able to build this stuff in a day because of all the stuff I spent the last 25 years learning, right? You're
Right.
not paying me for the how fast I was able to do it. You're paying me for like the finished product,
Right.
right?
It's the Picasso and
So
the cafe story.
exactly, right. So at the end of the day, like, is what I'm delivering to you valuable? We're not, and this isn't the industrial era where 40 hours equals so many widgets made, right? It's like we're my job is basically like making my job easier and making my coworkers' jobs easier as designers and developers, making them more efficient. And so if I'm able to do
That's
that, if
awesome.
I'm able to make other people more efficient, then as the company grows, that just becomes more and more valuable,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my God. Yeah. If you all of
And
a
and
sudden
in an
have 50
agency world, like
developers,
with each client, that becomes more valuable. You're compounding like how the value of that in each successive project, right? Because
uh,
we built this you're not building features at an agency so much as you're building new brands, right? New iterations, but you don't have to build a button over and over and over again for each client. You just have to change the padding and the border radius and the font,
maybe the
right? And the
animation,
brand
which
color.
you had in
Exactly.
there.
You can do all that through the
Yeah, like
tokens,
we
right?
change out the cubic Bezier, right? Like you
Hmm.
can plug stuff in there and then go in. And yes, you'll have to tailor the HTML. Like I've been at an agency with actually with Corey, who just dropped in the chat. $1 for copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, 99,999 for knowing what to copy
Where to
and where
paste
to
it.
paste
That's
it.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like it's that knowledge that you're really charging for. But yeah, like we try to get like a component thing that we could just
Oh my
reuse, and
gosh,
we kind of
stretch.
always hit a nice. We always hit kind of a roadblock with it because things just seem different from time to time. But I think design systems set up like this, um, yeah, this is just a really handy thing where you go in, you change these variables, and yes, you'll have to change the button because the designer, wants a span underneath so that the underline can do a different thing, right? Like you've always had to go in and tweak something because the designer, they're trying something new out, like not trying to
Yep.
crap on designers. They just, like they want to add a new
They want to
bit
be
of
creative.
polish to, yeah,
Yeah.
or like it really sells this brand, it communicates it better, and we need to add an extra div to the button to make it flip around. I don't
Yep.
know. But
So
you're
one of
not starting from
the yeah,
scratch, right? Like you're
right.
you're adding a div, you're adding a span, you're taking away something, but you're not starting from scratch. And this, the spacing can definitely be reused, right? Like that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Um, yeah, it
And
doesn't all
even if
need to go.
not, like it's not that hard to like adjust the scale to meet
Yep.
if if you're taking an existing design or whatever. But
Yeah.
one of the tips I have in there in the doc is to sell the results, not the system, right? So
Yeah.
if you think back to like when responsive design first became a thing, we had to like sell responsive. I don't know if you ever had to do that, but like convince
No.
people that, hey, we need to make this responsive. And it added X amount of time to make this thing responsive. And they didn't really start to see the value in that until like people started being on their phones all the time, right? And people want to do everything on their phones that they
but
could do
then
on their
but,
desktop.
but then everything needed to be an
Nobody,
app. We didn't
yeah,
even go to
well,
responsive. We just
that's
went
another
to like,
story.
well, my restaurant needs an
But
app. It's like, no, it
right.
doesn't.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
I can load the PDF in the app.
Right.
Um, yeah, like nobody reaches for their laptop first thing in the morning, right? You reach for your phone and you want to be able to do stuff on your phone, pay your mortgage or whatever.
Right.
Like, oh shit, it's the first. I gotta pay my mortgage on my
Yeah.
phone, right? And so now, like with design systems, instead of saying, hey, we need a design system and we need to do this visual style audit, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do that, like, don't try and convince them of that. Like, just build it, right? Build it small, start on that one feature, and then they'll see how much faster that made them, how much more consistent that made them, and you're selling like the results of that until you get it to this scale. and then the more work you're able to put into it, like the more the results sell themselves, right? Um, and so like my thing is like it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like just build it. Make that how you do the thing, right? Don't say we want, they don't the CEO doesn't give a shit about design systems, right? He cares about can we turn this picture of a website into a website in the least amount of time? And if a design system facilitates that, great.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but you're not gonna convince them to give you resources before you demonstrate results. Like that's been my experience anyway. Like you're gonna be hard pressed to convince anybody of the method, when without them seeing the results, right? Once you've established the results, and then they want to see those results replicated, then you can say, well, I need XYZ resources in order to scale that.
And they're gonna be saying like, hey, can you do that fast thing again? Not like, can you do design systems? It's like you said, they
Right.
don't care about design. They like that
Yeah,
it's fast. They like that it saves them money. They
exactly.
like that
When I was, that's how it happened at
the
Groupon.
engineers
So
are
when we
happy.
built the framework for internal tools, the consumer site and the merchant facing stuff were like, hey, why don't we have that? Why aren't we moving that fast? And so I ended up building frameworks on the consumer side and the merchant side, and until like the whole company was basically using CSS that I wrote, right? And
That's
so
cool.
when you have, hundreds of engineers and, 60 designers or whatever all using your system, and then it's like, then you have leverage. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
all
you
right,
have
well,
leverage, but
I'm
also
leaving. And I'm
like,
like, whoa, whoa.
can, can you imagine 100 engineers all just writing their own CSS? Someone wants to
Right,
use
exactly.
floats, and someone wants to use Flexbox, someone
Yeah.
wants to use Grid, and this person does.
And so, someone
That would
someone wants
be,
to use Bootstrap, and someone wants to use Tailwind, and someone wants to use,
yeah.
XYZ, and it's
Like
like,
you jump
uh,
from page to page, component to component, and it is just the Wild West.
oh
Yeah.
man, I have
Some more
some
stories. Okay.
screenshots of stuff that just was baffling,
Yeah.
how they marked it up. So,
Yeah.
like I said, the fewer people you have writing CSS, like the better. Um,
No, I think that is a
it doesn't
great
even have to
mantra.
be good. It doesn't even necessarily have to be good CSS. It's just like the more people that are touching it, like it's just out of control.
And to be clear, that is not a slight on CSS. I'm not at all
No,
like,
no, I love
you're
CSS.
right. I
I'm a
think
huge,
I just want to make that clear so that someone doesn't go out, quote that, and say like, see, no one should write CSS. The fewer people that write CSS, the better, right? Because taken out of context, it sounds like people should not write CSS and it's a bad language. I'm just
I mean,
adding
it's
a
just
bit
like
of,
things go faster if like, if you're like every team doesn't need a dedicated CSS person. Like I see a lot of discussions on Twitter about like, can I have a career if I only am interested in HTML and CSS? And my answer is yes, but right, like it depends, right? Like
mm,
it's about, and this applies to any role in tech, right? It's about like the thing that I've learned from people who've mentored me is like the more you advance is really related to the value that you deliver within an organization, right? So if you're just starting out, like are you contributing to your team? And then as a senior engineer, like am I contributing across teams, right? And then above senior, am I contributing like across parts of the organization? So between design, product engineering, and then you get up to principal where you're really driving like the technology that's being used and like how stuff's
got it.
getting done. And so as you're that's kind of been like how I've like advanced, right? Is like how can I take my skills and scale it so other people can take advantage of it? And that's kind of what led me down this path of like design systems, right? Is like, sure, I could just be on a feature team and just, turn this picture into the feature, but like that's not really helping out anyone else outside of my team, right? So how can I take that and allow everyone to leverage that, right, within the company?
Yeah, and design systems make complete sense. I've got a question, but I think the people in the chat are way
Yeah,
more
yeah.
interesting than I am. Uh, Antho, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming through. And it is interesting. Mike is dropping knowledge here, so definitely check out the recording because this is fantastic. So, all thank you for those kind words. That's really really very kind of you. And Kevin Powell says the M dot days. Yeah, M dot site.
Oh
M
boy,
dot. I'll still come across one of those. I'm just like, I don't want. Why is there a
the
mobile
old M
version
dot.
of? Yeah. And Corey says WAP sites, mobile sites. I get it, Corey. Uh, um, and Ben says this conversation reminds me of Eric Bailey's recent article recommending alphabetizing CSS rules by their property names because it's the one system that folks who are less familiar with CSS can grasp quickly. It's interesting.
I have strong feelings about that.
Yeah,
But
I don't like
we don't have time to
alphabetizing.
go into that.
It's
I'm not a fan, no.
yeah, I like grouping it. Yeah, we don't have to get into it, but it I think there should be some kind of organization the way that like Prettier does. Like it just makes decisions for you, and I don't have to worry about like it's a tabs or
This
spaces,
is
this or
why,
whatever.
so
Just
with the
prettier,
tokens, you could totally alphabetize it because the tokens are arranged in a way
in like
that,
a
hey,
BEM format almost.
all my
Text,
font stuff is here.
spacing,
All my,
border,
all of my animation
color.
stuff is grouped here,
Right,
right? And so it doesn't really matter how you
that's fine.
format it in the
Right.
actual CSS, but because like ultimately no one should be writing
Sorry.
the end CSS, right?
Yeah, I realized
Yeah.
I was
So
going border, I was going color, and no one could see it. It was secret. It was just me.
oh, well, that like I don't think I meant to like alphabetize that. I think that
Okay,
just kind of worked out that way. But
so you didn't mean the
oh,
tokens.
that's hilarious. Yeah, no. I didn't like purposely alphabetize the
Oh,
tokens, but the
I
com
just meant kind of grouping by
yeah, yeah, yeah.
by heading, by text, like
Right.
just because
Well,
the
like if
first
you did
word,
that in
yeah.
the CSS, right? Like you would have like you want to position something. Okay, now your position is here, your top is here, your left is here, but now it's up here.
Right.
And maybe there's something in between those, and it's like, ugh, like trying to edit that is fucking a nightmare. Like I don't know how
Yeah.
you would do
No,
that.
like yeah, exactly. Having top, bottom, left, right all together. Killian says he goes for chaos. Good to see you, Killian. Thanks for coming through. Kevin says alphabetizing only solves issues with having the same property multiple times in the selector. Oh, okay. Which granted can be frustrating. I never thought of that, Kevin. Thanks for pointing that out. But I'm not sure what else it solves. Yeah, that's grouping by purpose makes a lot more sense.
Oh,
Right. I like,
that reminds me.
yeah.
If we go back to our doc, right, in the top section with the visual audit, we've got our CSS stats. I have a before and after.
Ooh,
Uh,
I'm excited for this. All
so
right, so here's the
yeah.
before.
Hmm.
This was what I was rolling with. Still am rolling
Hmm.
with, but this is before Mike went through and saved me. So we got
Now,
a,
now keep in mind this is the entire
this is the
code base
entirety of
of
front end
the
horse.
site,
Yeah.
right? Where mine is just
It
the front page. So
although it should be like if Gatsby's doing its thing, and it doesn't
it's
seem to
not.
be. Yeah.
It's not, Alex.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, like I know, but if it were, let's envision a world. Close your eyes, everyone, where Gatsby was doing its thing, and this was only the CSS that the page needed. This would be smaller,
I,
and yeah.
I love people are like worried about like, saving 10K on a CSS when like a single image is like, like
But
half a
it
meg.
right, but that's different.
Or
Like
how many JavaScript libraries
JavaScript,
are we
yeah, because like
loading and
JavaScript versus images gets compared,
tracking scripts.
but JavaScript, like weight per KB is a lot heavier on processing and everything than an image is. But anyway, let's getting off topic a little bit there. But let's see what we got. So before, wow, that is a lot. I should have had people go. Okay, here we go. Let's take a guess. What do you think it's going to be? From 101 down to what, chat? What do you think? Let's go from 101 down to wow. No, seriously, like that's freaking crazy. I mean, it
And
does
then
make
if you scroll, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's noticeable. And I mean, like 90K, in the grand scheme of things is not like a shit ton. It's not gonna, you know, uh,
What do you mean?
it's not
Oh,
gonna solve
the
other
difference there?
problems.
Yeah, but this is
Yeah,
still
like
so
if
much
you
more
ran this through
maintainable.
Lighthouse, yeah, it's totally maintainable. If you ran this through Lighthouse, though, it wouldn't make that much of a
Right.
difference, right? But looking at this, it's like, hey, now we have like a
Yeah.
reasonable amount of fonts and colors,
Actually, like
and like our if you look at the bottom, and this is something I only recently noticed, all the way at the bottom of this page, or close to the bottom, there's a thing. Go up a little bit above these charts. There's a section right here. Go back down. Uh, right there. Nope. Sorry. A little bit further, I think.
Down or
What
up?
is that? I Oh, right here. Total versus unique declarations, right? Um, so this is basically like how often do you repeat yourself in your CSS?
Okay.
Um, and like the ratio there is like pretty cool. So like with this kind of way that I write CSS, like I'm not redeclaring stuff over and over again, right? I'm not declaring padding and stuff because I have these utilities that allow me to apply padding and things consistently, to apply flexbox consistently without having to say, oh, this is a nav list, and the nav list is display
Right.
flex, and each flex item is this. And now there's this other thing. This is display flex, and each item is this. Like I can just use utilities for that,
Right.
and concentrate on like what the pieces of that look like, right?
It's funny because these
But
look pretty similar until you look at the label of the y-axis, 68 to 13, and then
yeah,
this is 96 to 10. Like,
yeah,
wow.
we're just simplifying shit.
Yeah, man. This is cool though. Like this
and and
is
and like the visually the result is, if not precisely accurate, it's very similar. And this is
yeah.
like this is like a quick pass. This is a MVP, right? Like we could
Right,
add
but
all the stuff that front end
still,
horse has and bake all that stuff into the system. We could add
yeah.
all of like the animations and things like that.
Right, but
And
like
then we can,
still like
that frees us up to start looking at the performance stuff too, right? Like we
yeah,
can,
but for this
you
to be
know,
10 times weightier in terms of just styles that are hanging around and shouldn't be or could be combined or cleaned up in some way.
Mhm.
Um yeah, like guys, like everyone, this is the light one, and it's damn identical if you ask me. So that's the one that I have with all like we're not counting the animation here, right? Like that's not really part of the thing. So like you can ignore that kind of stuff. But like
It's
this is the same
it's funny.
thing.
I use Firefox, and like that background image, the thumbprint or whatever,
It
that does
doesn't
not
appear.
show up in Firefox.
That's
Yeah,
good
that's
to
weird.
know. That's good to know. Doing something
I'm just now
weird with
seeing
it.
that, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't add that. I'm like, wait, that's not even.
Fine.
I didn't see that before.
It's
It's
honestly
weird.
because I'm like, I don't know how to make this section interesting. So here's a Turing pattern and a blobby shape, and
Ah, there you go.
that's my design prowess is this section's boring without it, right? Because like
I
it's
don't
kind
know.
of boring
I
without
think
it.
I don't
Now
know.
it's fun.
Kind
Now
of
we're having
worked.
fun,
Now it's fun.
people. Who's having fun? I am. Um, just check the okay. O'Doyle rule says grouping by purpose +1. Yes. +2 from B1 Mind. Good to see you. I tend not to advocate for standards' sake. They should solve concrete problems folks are actually facing. Yeah, I just like the idea of like everyone's display thing being at the top or just in some place that's predictable so that if there's a big block of CSS, I'm not hunting all around and being like, all right, where is it across multiple engineers CSS, and just having like yes, the same way that like tabs or spaces is just bike shedding, and you're just kind of going like like let's argue for argument's sake. But I feel like prettier has made my life so much easier, just slapping that on and kind of rolling with whatever decisions it makes for the most part. I would just love a prettier for CSS, but it's also not a hill I'm dying on to go back. JavaScript tends to be more blocking, whereas images and styles tend to be handled right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say, but you said it much more eloquently, Ben. Thank you. And kudos on FEH's Friend and Horse's excellent color palette. I actually had a friend, a designer friend, do it. The only thing I picked, I think, in terms of the color palette, is this blue. But she picked the yellow and the red. I think I tweaked some colors, but yeah, but I chose Recoleta. That's all me. So I did a lot. But yeah, like I hired her. Oh, and she did the script. So the script, the colors, the rest is this guy. So it's all me to blame. She didn't do the CSS. That's all my fault. Um,
I
Beetle Mine
mean,
says,
this was still better than, a lot of projects that I've gone into as
"Well, I
far as
appreciate that."
like I think to this day, if you were to do CSS stats on Groupon site, it's insane because like it's
But at
really
the same
hard in an
time,
organization that
I,
large,
yeah, right. Like I'm
to
not
to
surprised.
to make an impact. And then I've been gone for a year, so they've just been
It's gone to
adding.
shit, Mike. It's just gone to
It's
shit.
kind of shit.
It's a
Yeah.
mess over there. People are,
That's
yeah,
the thing, like, and this is a whole other conversation, but like, when your organization, your engineering organization is interviewing for like computer science fundamentals, you tend to weed out a lot of people like myself who were kind of
right.
self-taught and are more front of the front end focus, as Brad Frost likes to say.
Yep.
And so, if you hire somebody who has really good HTML, CSS skills, it's almost by accident, right? And the fewer people you have with those skills, the fewer people you have to vet other people for those skills. And
It's
then
a
you end
really
up
good
with this
point.
kind of monoculture where you just have a bunch of devs that are really, essentially JavaScript devs
Right.
that struggle with or just aren't super interested in the visual aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
And
Could we
then
start
similarly
having
on the
white?
on the
Yeah.
yeah. On the design side, you're hiring designers for their visual style skills, their product design skills, but if they can code, that's like a bonus. No one's asking them like, hey, what's the difference between an inline and a block element, right?
Right.
If you're a designer, they're like, walk us through your portfolio. If you're an engineer, they're like, hey, do this sorting algorithm or something. But no one ever asks, what's how do you do this in Flexbox? If you do,
Right.
hey, props to your organization, but
Yeah.
that's not something that I've seen a lot of.
No, we need to get like whiteboard interviews that are like, all right, make a CSS grid layout where this and it was responsive. Like, let's start putting that on whiteboards. Let's start doing that for. No, I actually don't want any more whiteboard interviews. I think it's
No,
kind of a garbage format, but that would have been a nice change rather than like invert this binary
my
tree kind of bullshit.
my
I'd
interviews
rather.
now are sales pitches. Like I bring a deck and I basically do what I did for Front End Horse with that site, and I say,
Oh, that's
here's the
brilliant.
results of my audit. Here's how I would just come in day one and make your life easier.
Yeah.
And instead of I'm not applying for a role. I'm I'm saying here's what I can do for your organization, and then I let that decide like what my job is, right? Now I've been fortunate in my career, particularly as a Caucasian passing straight male, uh, but like my approach has always been like don't let the job like don't let them dictate to you what the job is. Like fine at Groupon, I was very fortunate in that it was a place where you could find, something that you were good at or that you were interested and make that your thing. And no one was going to tell you no if you delivered results on that, right?
That's cool.
And so like that's kind of like my approach now to other stuff is like just, make it the job that you want and don't let them tell you what the job is, right? Don't feel like you're not qualified for a job based on the job description. Find something that you're uniquely qualified to do, that something that you bring to the table and sell them on that, right? Just like with the system, sell the results, not the system itself. Don't sell the fact that Vue versus React, right? Just sell like, here's the stuff that I'm able to build.
Right.
I can come and hit the ground running, work within your stack or whatever.
Here's the
Um,
value proposition that I'm bringing to you.
yeah,
Versus like,
yeah,
oh, I'm checking 8 of the 15 things that you put on that job
right.
description, right? Like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
But also
yeah.
how are you checking it? Like I'm familiar with, PHP. Like that's such a
Must
vague
have
kind of thing.
15 years of React experience. Like
Right.
those
Exactly.
things aren't even written technically, usually
I
by the
have
people who
I have
are
10
the
years of
the
cool CSS experience. I don't know if you know that. But Bananas
there you
Dad.
go.
Ben Myers, thank you so much for that sub. Oh my goodness, Ben, you are just the best, Ben. Thank you so much. You are so generous. I
Ben's a
really
legend.
appreciate it. Really, really is. And 161 Ronin, thank you for following. Appreciate it. Joe Rule says, I should actually hit B1 Mind. Um, Value you bring is greater than the things you know. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Mike, thoughts on building custom design systems like shown today or extending Bootstrap slash Tailwind?
Yeah. So this is a decision that we faced when at Groupon, right? Was like, do we extend Bootstrap or do we create our own thing? And for me, I will always opt to create a custom thing because it solves the problem that you have. Frameworks generally like they're trying to solve everyone's problems, right? And so your problems might be different from my
Or
problems,
Google's problems,
and
right? Like if you're
or
picking up
Google's problems, right?
material, you're getting a bunch of
Exactly.
Google's solutions for what?
Yeah, like and yeah, and you know, I can understand like needing to like in order to like get in the Android App Store or whatever, having to follow some certain guidelines. But like when you're talking about the web, like it can be whatever, right? And so there's a lot of maintenance involved with extending one of those frameworks because those are constantly being iterated on, and then you're picking and choosing the parts that you need. It's always better for me to like just make something from scratch for each thing. With CoolCSS, what that allows me to do is have like kind of like a much like we have like 11D starters, right?
Right.
So we don't have to get all that set up. It's like a CSS framework starter, right? Where I can just plug in the prefix, and I can work with the tokens, and I don't have to write new button styles because I've already done that before, right? Dave Rupert has a relatively old article called where he says tiny bootstraps for every client, and that was kind of like a mantra that I ran with, right? Was that you know uh, instead of just kind of like willy-nilly making CSS for each page, like how do we make this a system that we can repeat not just within this project, but on future projects so that we're
Right.
not reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah, this is cool. We didn't actually get to this, but do you want to talk about it just kind of more in the abstract, or just kind of yeah, we were hoping to use it, but honestly, I wouldn't have changed anything that we did today, because this has been like
It's a
it's just
lot. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, design systems are like, like I said, it's different things to different people, and really it's the important thing is that it's solving the problems that you have, right? It's
right.
not you're not adapting someone else's thing to fit your workflow. But like for a designer, they're going to be focused on the UI kit, delivering those styles. For an engineer, it might be the component library, and this CSS framework kind of is the in between, right? That kind of facilitates turning those designs into the product, whether you're building like React components, or we're actually in the process at Provi of moving from Angular to Svelte.
Okay.
And so
Wow.
those transitions between stacks is a great opportunity to implement a design system because you're in there touching all the code.
Right.
You can say, hey, while you're in there, put all these classes on that component and it'll look, the way it's supposed to look, right?
That's
According to our
perfect.
designs. So,
Yeah, so component styles, individual component. Okay, so it's kind of what you showed us. Individual components are styled to be used in any context and composed into larger components using utility style. So a bit of like atomic design there. Is that
yep. Hmm.
cool? Utility style. So that's for spacing and layout, those kinds of things, right?
Yep.
Cool. And then the layout style. So those are the page.
Page layouts. Yep.
Cool. So you
And
kind of
they don't necessarily have to be a page layout. Maybe you have a layout that you apply to modals, right? And so you have this, header, footer, content thing in a modal. It could also be used in a page, but you can kind of nest these things and use them in different contexts,
got it. So then
depending on the complexity of it.
would component styles and layout styles sometimes, like in the modal example, overlap a little bit?
No, because the layout would dictate like the layout of the modal. So maybe you have like this top section with a title and the close icon, and then you have this main content section that's scrollable because it overflows, and then you have kind of a footer thing that has action, like
Right.
a continue
Like
or
yeah,
back or something
submit or
like that,
something.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the component styles are just like, what's the title component? What's the in the body of that? Is there maybe like there's an order confirmation thing with a table in there, or there's just read these terms and conditions and click
Got it.
OK, right?
So
The content, or, mhm,
the layout styles determines where everything goes inside the component or on the page, and the component styles say
yep,
font bold,
what
colors,
what's
that
in
sort of
it?
stuff.
Yep.
Got it. And then
Uh-huh.
as I need to space those things out between each other, or make something flex or grid, etc., that's where the utility
Yep.
styles come into play.
Alex, I have to step away for 1 minute. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
All right,
more
I'll
than
be right
happy to
back.
entertain. Here we go.
Okay,
Yeah,
be right back.
yeah. No worries at all. I'm actually going to go through some of the chat. Yesterday, I got a recruiter email. This is Corey. I got on LinkedIn. We're growing and looking for full stack backend engineers. So interesting. It's Alex. Yeah, it is me, Ben. I'm sorry. Um, Full stack backend engineers. Okay. Recruiter emails are interesting. We should have a day where we all just read like our best recruiter emails. That'd be a fun episode. Ben says building your own framework affords you the chance to do testing with your own audience too. That's a good point. Instead of assuming the off-the-shelf framework has tested it all, let alone a representative demographic. That's a really good point. And yeah, I don't know. I've had bad experiences pulling some component frameworks off the shelf and just kind of running with them. Material was especially painful just because they have a lot of divs going on, or just a lot of DOM elements. They add a lot to the DOM, and it's hard to figure out what's doing what. And if you want to restyle it, it starts to become kind of a mess. Wilster says, I feel like the deal with the tech company solutions being their solutions expands to almost everything. It's a big part of why I haven't learned React. I say this phrase often, but it's a corporate solution to a corporate problem. I don't need it for a small company's page. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very fair critique. I like React. I like parts. I like React the library. I'm not going to get into too many React hot takes of my own. Take care, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. We're going to wrap up here soon anyway, but really appreciate it. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And yes, they're definitely solving Facebook problems for everyone. And whether or not you need Facebook solutions or whether you prefer something else get prioritized, yeah, that's a valid conversation and a valid critique. I'd be interested. Are you more interested in something like 11T or, I'm not saying, well, what's the alternative to React? There's nothing else out there. But are you just like, are you running like something like 11T where it's just, I feel like that is a good alternative for like a smaller, I said it multiple times. Maybe I'll say it 9 more times. For that kind of thing. Like I think a levity hits that. We're not going to use it for Facebook level problems, but it's perfect for, how'd you put it, a small company's page, something like that. I think it's great. And Corey says, I saw your JavaScript proficiency. We have an urgent request to fill a Java position. Same thing. They're the same. People don't know this. If you haven't done Java before, it's the same thing as JavaScript. It's the same. It's fine. If you know one, you know the other. It's really identical. It's been said 3 times. Ben's already here. Yeah. Oh, man. But yeah, so I'm not just saying this because Mike isn't here, but don't tell him. No, we were going to wrap up. Oh, Mike's back? Cool. I'm going to bring you back in. All right. Welcome back, Mike. Need to come a little closer. There you go. Cool. So we touched on CoolCSS, and we're going to create a theme with tokens, but I think we're good where we are. I'm good to wrap it up if you are. Would that be all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted to offer the chat just another chance. But I wanted to. Oh, hold on. I opened up the Twitch thing, so you might hear not go. Another chance to ask any questions before we head out. Now or never chat, or in Discord where Nightbot is shilling like a pro. Awesome. So when you were gone, Mike, I asked Wilster what they use in lieu of React. Not saying that React is the only thing out there, but they said they don't like that Facebook level problem for a small company page where you don't need to, he was going off, or sorry, they were going off of, we don't know, or sorry, if you pull out like Material UI, you're taking on Google's solution to their problems. And they said that's exactly why I don't use React, because it's Facebook's solution to their problems. And they're saying that they're liking SvelteKit lately. Levity is definitely a great tool, but it's just not my gig. Cool. Yeah, I feel like SvelteKit has the potential for getting onto some pretty big projects if you wanted to. I'm really interested in Svelte. I've got to have someone on to like walk me through it because
me too.
Yeah. It's
that's our stack, and I don't know anything about Svelte. So I
yeah.
think that's why I'm loving 11D because it does a lot of the things that I want it to do, and I can kind of push the limits of what static sites can do with it without having to dig into like a specific like framework ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a super technical guy, and I'm so far removed from my days of writing CRUD apps in PHP that like I wouldn't even know how to do that in a modern stack. I'd spend like the design systems slash CSS guy for so long that when I have to do this stuff on a side project, uh I just like make it happen in 11D somehow.
That's, I mean,
So
as long as you can get something up and live, that's perfect. That's fine.
yeah.
Ed says thanks for the stream. So one more thing that I actually do want to ask you, Mike, is
Mhm.
if someone wants to get into this, right? Like if someone's like,
Yeah.
"Wow, design system sounds awesome. I want Mike's job, not his exact job, but I want a job similar to his." They're not. Hopefully, they're not coming for your job. But
You
if
can
they
have
want
my
to learn
job. That's
more,
fine. I had a good I
if
had a
they
good run.
if they want to learn more, and just yeah, where can they go to kind of
Yeah,
begin
so
their
if you want to jump back to the doc, I have some links to some
perfect?
resources there.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Let me pull that up.
I got all the bases covered, Alex. I knew
You
this
really
was going to
do. I
come
don't know
up.
why I'm here.
So first, I want to give a big shout out to Clarity Conference, which is a design systems conference. I want to say this is going to be their fifth or sixth year, and it's run by Gina Ann, who she is kind of the
Design tokens
uh,
person, right?
yeah, she's like kind of the founder of design tokens or
I didn't know
popularized
that.
the idea of design tokens. Yeah. And she started this conference several years ago, and it's great. Last year was interesting because obviously it was not in person. I was very much looking forward to going to New Orleans, but it ended up being online.
Right.
And it was honestly like the most fantastic conference experience that I've had. It was so like the talks were like filmed by like a professional camera crew.
Oh, that's
There
cool.
were there were all of these networking opportunities. So I took advantage of that. I talked to probably over 20 people, which is way more than I would have spoken to had I gone in person. I probably would have just like hung out with, like the same two people, right?
Right.
So I was out, you're able to kind of like see, where people work and just put 5 minutes, get on their calendar for 5 minutes. And
That's
I talked
cool.
to, a guy who was building a design system for the PlayStation UI, and I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. I want to find out what that's all about.
That's
I had
cool.
somebody requested to talk to me, you know, being I don't even know if I was even still at Groupon, but like people reaching out to me from like the New York Times just to kind of pick my brain. And
That's cool.
it's great being around people who are all focused on the same thing and kind of commiserating with all of the challenges of design systems, because none of us really have this figured out. We're just kind of like doing the best we can
Yeah,
with
it's all
what we
very
have.
new. So you're all kind of
Yeah.
iterating and trying new things, throwing new ideas out there. Someone borrows it, turns it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the web is still very, very new.
Yeah,
Um,
and the conference isn't like specifically like every talk isn't design systems. A lot of it is about like inclusivity and accessibility and just
oh,
a lot of the
Henri's there.
stuff that
Awesome.
yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
just
I
so
love
many good
Henri.
people.
He's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great conference. Anyways,
that's
highly
cool.
recommend it. And then also there's the Design Systems repo, which is like a collection of articles and public facing design systems. So I've drawn a lot of inspiration with how I've built my systems from um, certainly Salesforce's Lightning design, um, uh, uh, Polaris, which is I want to say Shopify's design
Yeah, I
system.
think so.
But this has like this is basically Atlassian's really good.
Yeah.
This is like a repository of like every single public facing design system. So you can kind of like draw inspiration and decide like kind of like, hey, what parts of the system do I need? And who's doing this well? Who's documenting it well? Who's structuring it well? There's people who are sharing their Figma UI kits that you can kind of learn from, which is really cool. And then speaking of Figma, the next item on the list is a very similar site, but it's done by Figma. And
Ooh,
so
this
they have
site is
articles.
gorgeous.
Isn't it nice?
I just really love
This
that. That is wow.
Yeah. So this has lots of articles about design systems, as well as stuff specific to building systems in Figma. So that's a really handy site.
Yeah,
And then I linked to several books that that I have, design systems, expressive design systems, which is a book apart book, very concise, very well done.
got it.
And then I want to say Envision uh, sponsored the next one there, Design Systems Handbook, and that one's got Gina Ann contributed to that one.
Oh wow.
Uh, and Diana, she was at I think she was at GitHub for a while.
Cool.
So a lot of people who've been through the design system trenches sharing
Right.
their knowledge. And yeah, it's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I dropped just now the link to this whole doc. If you just got in a little late, um, Mike basically went through front end horse and did a full audit, used all these tools. Like, definitely check out the replay here, and all of the resources that we looked at on stream are in this one site. And I'll say it out: fh-tack.netlify.app. Just in case you're watching the replay.
That
And
was just I tried to come up with a clever horse related name for the
well,
design
you got to
system.
have a cool name for your design system, and you got TAC, equipment used
Yeah.
in horseback riding. It's perfect. I
So
think it's
so this
perfect.
keeps this keeps our horse under control
Yeah,
basically. Uh,
exactly.
and it's funny, I don't, for those of you in the chat who have children, I learned that term from Blippi. So if you don't know, Blippi is essentially a millennial version of Pee Wee Herman that does YouTube
Okay.
educational YouTube videos. Uh, and yeah, my kid loves some Blippi. So he was at a horse ranch and he's like, yeah, this is the tack. And like, I'm learning stuff. Having kids is like you're learning stuff all over again.
Yeah.
There you go. Lots of Blippi in the house.
Lots of
Yeah.
Blippi in my house. It's funny.
A lot of toddler parents know all about Blippi.
I learned all about what second graders enjoy back when I taught. So yeah, there, when
There's
you're
now
yeah.
Blippi is so popular, he has a Blippi clone that a guy, like literally an actor who looks like him, that he does all the mannerisms, but it's not Blippi.
That's
It's very
weird.
disturbing.
Never eat
Yeah.
soggy watermelons. NESW, north, south, east, west. Yeah. I'm like, I know that from something. What do I know that from? Um, but yeah, this has been phenomenal, Mike. This is I echo everyone in the chat that honestly, this was such an insightful talk. You had just so much knowledge to drop. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for doing what you did. I think the example made it so much more clear. I think just going from something that at least I know well, at least other people are able to see and they might be familiar with it, and seeing how you can pare it down and simplify it and take a lot of the decisions that I'm making just at a whim and distilling that into just a few decisions rather than why not anything? Why not
Yeah.
just throw any size out there? The value, the tips on, I think Killian said it, on your career and like going in and being like, here's the value that I can bring. This is why I'm worth this much money versus I check some boxes. How much will you pay me? Right? Like that flip is such a great tip.
I
This
got
was just
one more pro tip for you.
okay.
Uh, Create a folder in your email called Show Me the Money. And anytime anyone says anything praising you,
Mm-hmm.
put a copy of that in your Show Me the Money folder. And then when review time comes up, you have this like kind of this whole thing of kudos that you can show to your boss and say,
This is a
here's kind
raise
of
right
like
here.
the impact that I'm having on the organization.
Yeah, I
So
tried that, but they were like, most of these are your mom. What do you can't. This is not. Yes,
I
you
have
are.
another I have another folder called Get a Box, which anytime I fuck up and get called out for it, that goes in the Get a Box folder. Like Get a Box, put all your shit in it, you're done, right? Like get out of here.
Okay.
Uh,
I was like,
so
what's the get a box?
two
That's
folders.
that's
Yeah.
really good. But yeah, no. So Chad, if you could email me anything nice you said about this stream, I would appreciate it.
Yep.
I can categorize that
The
right
uh
into
the
one of
front end
my.
horse CEO will, get
Mm-hmm.
get word of that, and you'll get a
Really
nice little
hoping
raise.
to get a raise from that this year.
And then
Um,
you can finally pay for this design system that I made for you.
Shit. Yeah, Mike, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I'm so glad you think so. Yeah, it's just been a blast.
Long
And
time,
honestly,
long time listener, first time caller.
yeah, I was saying like it's funny that we are now hearing each other like immediately because I would watch you stream, you would watch me stream, all that stuff. Um, yeah, but be one mind. It was great. Like Mike was fantastic. Also, um, Mike is a phenomenal member of the Discord. So I know that it's been dropped a few times. I'll spam it myself. Discord. Yeah, come join, chat if you have any more follow up questions or anything. Mike's always in there, and it's really great to have you in the Discord, just part of the community, man. It's been a
Well, thank
blast.
you.
So,
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. It's a really supportive community, and a lot of fun. I'm
you
enjoying it.
definitely make it that way. So thank you to everyone here who has been just yeah, awesome. Let's go raid Sir Jason Langsdorff. What do y'all think?
Hey,
I
Jason.
see he is streaming. Let's go drop in. We got about 20 people in here. Yeah, thank you so much. If you're not following, hit follow real quick so that we can see you next time. Tomorrow, we'll be streaming a component carousel. I'll explain it in the Discord, but yeah, let's go raid. Thanks so much for coming through. Bye.